Hey guys, tonight we're going way back, like over 1,000 years back. You're bundled in layers of itchy wool, your breath fogs the air in front of you, and the reek of smoked meat, wet dogs, and damp wood fills your nose. Welcome to your life now. You're a Viking, and you're about to spend the winter in a drafty, smoky, glorified barn called a longhouse. Oh, and yeah, you probably won't survive this. The winter is long, food is tight, the cold is brutal. But don't worry, you'll be asleep for most of it. Well, hopefully. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop a comment telling me what time it is where you are and what city you're listening from. I always love hearing where you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing that hits you is the sound. Muted by the thick turf walls but always present. The creaking of the beams overhead as the wind nudges snow against the slanted roof. A child whimpers somewhere to your left, half awake. A pig snorts behind a low wooden partition, and beneath it all, the low crackle of fire from the central hearth, its glow reaching only so far. You've made it to the beginning of winter, which is an achievement in itself. The fall harvest was okay. Not amazing, not terrible, but enough to store away in clay jars and under planks sealed with dried animal bladders. Everything smells a little fermented, a little old, but it's all you've got. You step into the longhouse. The doorway is low, which forces you to duck. Not by accident. Vikings built their longhouses low to keep the warmth in and the wind out. The door, thick and heavy, shuts with a solid thud behind you, cutting off the hiss of sleet outside. Inside it's dim, lit only by the flickering fire and a few fish oil lamps that leave trails of soot up the wooden posts. Your eyes take a moment to adjust. It's darker than you're used to. The air is warm but close, thick with smoke that doesn't fully escape through the smoke hole in the roof. Every breath tastes like charcoal and old stew. This place is your everything. You'll eat here, sleep here, work here, raise your kids here, and maybe die here. It's roughly 75 feet long, about 25 feet wide, and shared with your entire extended family, plus a handful of goats, a few cows, some chickens, and whatever stray cats refuse to leave. Privacy? Not a thing. Everyone knows everything. That scratching noise you make in the middle of the night. Yeah, they all hear it, and know they're not being subtle about it. Your space is just a narrow platform along the wall, raised slightly off the ground to keep the cold from seeping into your bones. It's padded with straw and draped in pelts. Deer, wolf, sheep, whatever you've hunted or inherited. You sit down slowly, careful not to jostle the person already lying at the other end. It's your cousin, or brother, or someone's cousin's brother. Relationships blur here. What matters is proximity. You share heat, stories, and the occasional accidental elbow to the face. The longhouse is built from overlapping wooden planks, often birch or pine, and insulated with packed earth, clay and straw. Thick thatch covers the roof, heavy with snow already. The walls lean in slightly, not by design but because the years have settled them that way. You run your hand along the rough wood. It's worn smooth in spots, polished by generations leaning, sitting, living. And the smell. Let's talk about the smell. It's not bad exactly, but it's definitely intense. A complicated blend of wet wool, sweat, smoke, fermented fish, and animal fur. Somehow your nose just stops caring after a few days. Maybe your brain gives up. Maybe you just become one with the musk. There's a logic to the chaos. The animals are tucked into stalls on one end, close enough to hear and smell, far enough to avoid stepping in anything unpleasant during a midnight wander. The fire burns in the centre, with hanging pots bubbling something vaguely edible. Meat dries on overhead racks, and herbs dangle from the rafters, turning crispy and fragrant as they cure. Overhead, shields, tools, and the occasional half-finished bow are tucked into beams for safekeeping. The fire isn't for fun, it's survival. It never goes out. Someone is always tending it, tossing in wood or dried peat, stirring the coals to keep them hot. You don't want to be the one who lets the fire die. Cold isn't just discomfort, it's danger. People freeze in their sleep. Infants stop breathing. Elders don't wake up. So yeah, you pull your weight, even if that means dragging yourself out of bed in the pitch dark to add a log at 3 a.m. One interesting fact. Longhouses weren't just practical, they were symbolic. The hearth represented family and continuity. The building was aligned east to west in some places, perhaps for cosmological reasons, sunrise and sunset marking the rhythm of life. But scholars still debate the significance of certain features, like the orientation of doors or the placement of animals. Some argue it was just the easiest layout for the climate. Others think it reflected deeper mythological beliefs, like the longhouse itself being a microcosm of the Norse cosmos. But in the middle of all that symbolism, you're just trying to not freeze your toes off. You settle in, tug your wool blanket tighter, and shift to make room for the dog that's decided your feet are the best bed in the house. Your eyes close, lulled by the soft rhythm of breathing, the hiss of wind beyond the turf walls and the occasional crackle of the fire. There's no silence here, but it's a comforting kind of noise, one that says, we're still alive, we're still warm, and for now, that's enough. By the time midwinter's first bite sets in, the longhouse has changed. You feel it before you even step outside, because you don't, not unless you have to. The air is sharper, thinner, more brittle. You wake up with a nose that feels like it's been dipped in ice water, and a throat that scrapes dry with every inhale. The longhouse walls, so sturdy and thick back in autumn, now seem to groan with the weight of what's coming. It's not a storm, not yet. It's that heavy silence that settles in before winter truly clamps its jaw. Everyone's pace slows, not because they're lazy, far from it. It's because every movement wastes heat, and heat is now currency. You become efficient, strategic. You learn not to move unless necessary. Your steps become smaller, tighter. You're wrapped in every layer you own, even indoors. 2 tunics, a wool cloak, foot wraps, and whatever animal hide you've claimed as your own. You eat meals slowly, not out of politeness, but because it lets the heat linger in your belly a little longer. There's no such thing as a quick snack. Even your breath feels rationed. The days are short, 4, maybe 5 hours of decent light, and light is being generous. It's more of a murky greyness that filters in from the smoke hole above. Most of the time, the sun doesn't so much rise as it sulks behind clouds like it's embarrassed to show up. Candles and oil lamps become precious, flickering little suns you guard like gold. You wonder how many are left. Someone's counting. Someone always counts. The cold outside isn't like modern cold. It's not a brisk chill you can complain about while holding a latte. This cold wants to end you. It's quiet and clever. It creeps into the cracks and waits. It eats at the weakest. Old bones, young lungs, unprotected toes. You know it, and so does everyone around you. You hear it in the way your grandmother coughs a little harder after dark. You see it in the way someone winces when removing their boots. And no one says anything, not yet, because saying it might make it real. You peek outside only when necessary and what you see isn't comforting. The world is white and still. Snow has drifted halfway up the walls. The wind carves ridges along the roof like long claw marks. Trees groan under the weight of ice, and sometimes, in the dead of night, one will split with a sound like a god cracking their knuckles. It's beautiful. It's terrifying. You close the door faster each time. Inside, the longhouse becomes a womb, a very loud, very crowded womb. Everyone is in here now, full families, visiting relatives who got caught before the first snows, even travellers who traded labour for shelter. You're packed together like salted fish. There's warmth in numbers, sure, but there's also aroma. The smell intensifies with each day. No one bathes, water is frozen. And anyway, stripping down is a gamble. You don't want your skin exposed for longer than it has to be, so you stink. Everyone stinks. It's egalitarian in a way. And then there's the noise. Not just the fire, but the layered symphony of winter living. You hear people coughing, laughing, snoring, praying. A child hums a song they barely remember. Someone's sharpening a knife with slow rhythmic strokes. The animals shift and grunt in their stalls. Every sound is amplified by the silence outside. It feels like you're living in someone's ribcage, all breath and heartbeat and echo. You help repair gaps in the insulation, stuffing wool and moss into the wall cracks where icy drafts sneak in. Someone tried hanging an old sail as an extra curtain, tacking it to the rafters for added warmth. It sort of works. At least it looks like you're trying. The hearth fire is restocked obsessively. You dream about that fire. It's more important than food now. If the fire dies, so do you. Here's a fringe little fact. Some Vikings believed fire wasn't just warmth. It was spiritual, a small god even, a being you had to respect. You didn't spit into it. You didn't curse near it. You fed it carefully, as if you were tending a sacred beast. Some elders whispered that the fire had moods, and that a flickering flame could foretell arguments, or births, or death. No one talks about it openly. But when the fire dances strangely, a few eyes linger longer than usual. Your daily routine shrinks. Tasks that once required movement are now done as close to the fire as possible. Carving, sewing, cooking, all done crouched like cats near the warmth. Some people seem to half hibernate. They barely talk, wrapped in furs, only their eyes peeking out. And who can blame them? Sleep becomes not just rest, but strategy. The more you sleep, the less food you need. The less time you're awake, the less you're exposed to the cold. You watch your breath curl in the lamplight like ghost speech. Your body becomes its own furnace, and sleep is the only time it gets to reboot. But of course there's tension. Always. It builds quietly in these tight quarters. Someone mumbles about the stew tasting off. Someone else thinks the baby's crying too much. One guy keeps losing at Nefertaful and accuses the old man of cheating. It's not about the stew or the baby or the game. It's about nerves fraying one thread at a time. No one says that out loud either, but it's there. And then there's the big unknown. How long will this winter last? Most years it's 5, maybe 6 months of harsh cold. But sometimes it stretches longer. The worst kind of waiting. Scholars still debate what climate conditions hit Scandinavia in the 9th and 10th centuries. There's evidence of a volcanic eruption that cooled the atmosphere for years, leading to brutal winters and failed crops. Some sagas even hint at Fimbulvinter, the mythic long winter before the end of the world. Just stories, probably. You wonder, in the dark of early morning, if this is one of those years, if the world is shifting, if the cold means something bigger, but then someone passes you a hot cup of mead, or the fire flares just right, and for a while you let yourself believe that spring will come. You wrap the furs tighter, burrow deeper into the hay, and close your eyes. Outside the wind howls, inside the longhouse breathes. The longhouse doesn't just shelter you, it contains you, swallows you whole. Over time its every plank and post becomes a part of your life. You wake with the beams creaking over your head and fall asleep to the same wooden groans. You know which floorboards shift, which knots in the timber look like faces when the fire flickers. You even know the rhythm of water dripping down the inner wall, when the snow begins to melt and leak through the thatch, an ominous sign, always. The structure is more than just a roof. It's a marvel of Viking ingenuity, not sleek, not symmetrical, but efficient and adaptable. The longhouse you live in is built low and long, like a ship tipped over and turned into a home. In fact, some scholars argue that Viking seafaring experience directly influenced their buildings. You can kind of feel it in the way the curved beams arch overhead like a hull, and how the wooden ribs hold the house together like a ship's skeleton. There's something strangely nautical about living here, even this far from the sea. Its bones are thick timber, pine, birch or oak if you're lucky, but wood is scarce, so nothing goes to waste. Old broken tools, snapped oars, bits of driftwood. If it burns or insulates, it's part of the house now. The walls are filled out with wattle and daub, a medieval mix of woven sticks plastered over with a slurry of mud, clay and straw. It holds the heat in and the wind out, mostly. But when the wind really screams, especially during those February gales, it sneaks through anyway. You feel it as a cold finger down your neck, a whisper over your cheeks while you sleep. Everyone tucks in tighter on those nights. Then there's the roof. It's steeply pitched and thickly thatched with straw, reeds or turf blocks, sometimes layered with overlapping sod to keep the heat from escaping. It works until it doesn't. Too much snow can collapse it, too little maintenance and it leaks. Inside you can see the layers, each winter adding its own stains and droops. The smoke hole up top is the only exit for the hearth's constant exhale, and it's never perfect. Some days the smoke just clings to the rafters, folds downward, and turns everyone into a blinking, coughing mess. Still, this place is warm in its own way. Not cosy warm, not blanket and cocoa warm, but survival warm. The hearth is always central, literally and symbolically. Everything orbits around it. Sleeping, cooking, storytelling, arguing, apologizing. The fire creates a small circle of light, and beyond that is a kind of twilight where people whisper and sleep. Further still, near the walls, is darkness. That's where the cold lingers, and where the animals huddle in their pens, steaming quietly in the night. The sleeping areas are raised platforms. sometimes just a few planks nailed together, sometimes built-in benches with storage underneath. You sleep along the walls, curled against others, sharing warmth. Each platform belongs to a family unit or cluster, sometimes mixing in animals or orphans or elderly relatives who need looking after. Bedding is as luxurious as you can manage. Coarse wool blankets, thick pelts, armfuls of straw, maybe a goose-down pillow if you're wealthy. Otherwise you wrap yourself in whatever you own. No one sleeps on the floor unless they're sick, or punished, or very, very drunk. That's another thing. This place holds stories, memories, fights, births, deaths. It's more than a home. It's a timeline. The walls have seen everything. There's a scorched mark near the hearth from where someone knocked over a pot of stew during a wedding feast 2 winters ago. The roof beam with the carved runes. That was your great-uncle, who swore it kept trolls out. The blood stain by the doorframe. A pig slaughter gone wrong. No one cleans it exactly. Things just fade. And you learn to live among ghosts and echoes. There's an odd comfort in knowing the house remembers. You can trace your own growth against the wall where you used to sit, back when your feet didn't reach the floor. You still sit there sometimes, toes dangling now, and feel that old connection. The house has changed as you have. Worn down, a little draftier, but still holding fast. Sometimes, late at night, when you're lying on your back watching the smoke swirl above, you imagine the Longhouse from the outside. A small mound, barely visible against the snow. A single crooked line of light where the door doesn't quite seal. And inside, life. So much life packed into so little space. It's hard to believe you fit. Of course, not every longhouse is the same. Some are grand, like chieftains' halls, massive structures with separate chambers and rows of carved support beams. Those have benches for guests, dedicated sleeping quarters, storage lofts, even indoor latrines if you're really fancy. But your house? It's simple, communal, efficient. It's not meant for style. It's meant for not dying in winter. Here's something quirky. Some Viking houses were built with the dead in mind. Literally. Archaeologists have found graves buried beneath the floorboards, ancestors intentionally placed under the hearth or sleeping platforms like guardians of the family. Sleep above your great-grandmother and you might dream of her, or at least think twice before kicking someone in your sleep. No one's sure if this was spiritual protection or just a very practical use of frozen soil. Either way, it's cozy. Debates still swirl about certain features. Did every longhouse have a smoke hole? Some researchers argue that smoke simply filtered through the thatch, slowly enough not to suffocate everyone inside. Others believe the hole was essential and meticulously aligned for airflow. There's no consensus, just ash-stained rafters and lots of theories. Like most things Viking, the answers are part fact, part guesswork, and part myth. Still, when you press your hand against the wall and feel the faint heat of the hearth radiating through the wood, you don't really care about architectural debates. You care that it's warm, that the walls are holding, that no snow is falling on your face tonight. You shift on your platform, adjusting the folded tunic you've shoved under your head as a makeshift pillow. The straw beneath you crunches. Someone stirs next to you, muttering in their sleep. The wind hisses outside like it's frustrated it can't get in. You smile a little, pull the furs up over your nose and let your eyes close. The house breathes, groans, stretches with the cold, and you, inside its belly, finally begin to drift. The fire is everything. You don't really think about it during the warmer months, when your arms are sunburned from hauling nets or stacking hay, when the world still has colour and the house is mostly empty. But in the winter, when frost clings to the inside of the walls and even your breath feels like a betrayal of warmth, the hearth is the centre of the universe. Its low, glowing coals pulse like the heart of some ancient beast, steady, dependable, always watching. It's not a fireplace in the way you might imagine it. There's no stone mantelpiece, no decorative woodwork, no comfy chairs. This fire lives in a shallow pit dug straight into the dirt floor, ringed with flat stones blackened by generations of soot. Pots hang from iron hooks above it, suspended from a long wooden beam that creaks and hisses as it absorbs heat and smoke. Around the hearth, the floor is charred and uneven, scuffed by boots and stained with countless drips of soup, grease, mead, and whatever else has boiled over in the last few decades. You wake up each morning, if you can call it morning when the sky still looks like late evening, to the sight of someone poking at the embers. It's usually the eldest person who wakes first. Maybe out of habit, or maybe because their bones can't stand the cold. They ease themselves off the bed platform with a groan, shuffle to the hearth, and begin the ritual, scraping out ash, adding slivers of dry wood, blowing gently until the fire stirs and stretches and begins to glow again. There's an unspoken reverence to it. No one talks loudly near the fire when it's being fed. No one rushes it. You watch as sparks leap and vanish in the smoke above, tiny lights playing tag before fading into the dark. It's oddly calming. This little routine, repeated every day, means you're still alive. The fire means life. And it doesn't just warm you, it defines your day. Everything is organised around it. You cook your meals here, boiling fish and roots into thick, smoky stews. You dry your socks and tunics on sticks laid nearby. You sharpen blades by firelight, stitch torn clothing, and tell stories that stretch into hours, your faces flickering like the shadows on the wall. People gravitate toward it without thinking. There are always a few of you camped close to the hearth, even if you're just staring into the flames like they might offer secrets. And maybe they do. You've seen things in those embers, shapes that look like ships or animals or eyes. Nothing solid, but still. Enough to make you believe, or at least wonder. There's an unspoken rule in the Longhouse. If someone's cold, you make room. Elbows are jabbed, knees are tucked in, someone shifts their stool. No one argues. You might grumble, sure, but you scoot over. Everyone remembers what it's like to be too far from the warmth. That kind of cold doesn't just sting. It gets inside your chest and settles behind your ribs, like some creeping thing that never leaves. The fire also draws the children, who gather near it like moths, playing with carved wooden animals or flicking pebbles into the embers when they think no one's watching. And the elders, of course, always nearest the flames, wrapped in layers of wool and skin, their feet propped on warm stones pulled from the coals earlier that morning. One of them, your aunt maybe, or some relation too complex to label, tells stories, weaving tales of giants and sea serpents and gods that walk in human form. Sometimes the fire crackles right on cue, like it's adding sound effects. But it's not all comfort. The fire can turn on you. More than once, someone's pelt caught a stray ember and went up in a flash. The house still smells faintly of burned fur from last year's incident. And then there's the smoke. You live in it, breathe it, taste it in your bread. Your eyes water so often you barely notice anymore. Some people develop a constant cough, especially the babies. There are theories, folk beliefs really, that the smoke keeps out bad spirits. Maybe it does. It definitely keeps out comfort. And fire duty, that's a chore no one escapes. Even you. Especially you. Everyone takes turns feeding the flame, even in the middle of the night when you're finally warm, your toes curled under a sleeping dog, and your dreams just start getting good. Someone nudges you. It's your turn. You groan, roll out from under your fur like a reluctant slug, and shuffle over to the dying coals. You know the steps by heart. Add dry kindling first. Birch bark works best. Blow gently. Don't panic if it smokes too much. Just wait. Feed it slow. Let it build. You crouch there in silence, listening to the occasional pop as the fire takes hold. You watch the sparks spiral upward through the smoke hole, disappearing into the starless night. No one thanks you. No one even speaks. But they sleep more soundly, and you know why. Here's a strange little fact. Some Viking families would burn specific herbs or bones in the fire, not just for the smell, but as offerings. Certain bones were said to bring good luck or keep the gods attentive, and the scent of burning juniper or pine resin wasn't just pleasant, it was sacred, a way to honour the ancestors or, depending on who you asked, a method to ward off evil creatures that wandered in from the woods during the dark months. There's still debate over just how ritualised the hearth was. Was it a religious altar? Or simply the best heat source around? Some scholars argue that families prayed before it, made oaths around it, even conducted quiet rituals on solstice nights. Others say that's just modern romanticism, reading too much into what might have been everyday survival. But when you sit there, watching the flames curl and whisper, it's hard not to feel like there's something older at work. You poke the fire one last time before crawling back into bed. The light softens as the logs settle. Shadows sway gently across the walls. Someone stirs, sighs, then returns to sleep. The warmth has spread again, thin but present, like a blanket you all share in spirit if not in fabric. As you lie back down, the fire dances on your closed eyelids, glowing red behind the skin. You're safe for now, warm enough. The house breathes, the fire holds, and so do you. The beds aren't really beds, not the kind you're used to. No soft mattress, no crisp linen sheets, no feather pillows. Just a wooden platform shoved up against the longhouse wall, layered with straw that pokes through every layer of cloth you own. It crunches when you move, squeaks when you breathe, and somehow always manages to jab you in the hip no matter how you shift. But in the deep freeze of Viking winter, it's still the warmest place you've got, and tonight you crawl onto it like a shipwreck survivor reaching dry land. It's raised a foot or so off the floor, mostly to avoid the cold that creeps through the earth. Below it, sometimes, you stash firewood, kindling, or a half-frozen sack of turnips you're pretending is a pillow. The straw mattress is held in place with a few rough-hewn boards and the weight of your own body, along with a jumble of furs that have long since lost their original scent. Now they smell like you, and the other people who share your platform. Some combination of family members, a cousin's kid, and maybe someone who just never left after last Yule. There's a system, of course, an order to who sleeps where, even if it changes night to night. The outer edges for the young and the healthy, the ones who can handle the cold that leaks in through the walls. Closer to the centre sleep the older folk, the babies, anyone with a cough or a bad hip. And in the middle, tangled up with wool blankets and sheepskin cloaks, is you, wedged between your uncle's knees and your sister's foot. It's less like a bed and more like a shared human casserole, layered in body heat, breath, and whatever food smells clung to your clothes from earlier. You always sleep in the same direction, head toward the wall, feet out. If everyone follows that rule, you avoid the worst of the accidental face smashing in the night. Doesn't always work, though. More than once you've been kicked awake, elbowed, or startled by a nose that isn't yours brushing your cheek in the dark. Personal space? Laughable. You've redefined intimacy with people you barely liked during summer. But in winter, warmth matters more than manners. The bedding is creative. Not everyone has the same setup. You've seen some people pile together every piece of clothing they own and call it a blanket. Others sleep directly on fur pelts, animals side up for warmth. If you're lucky, you have layered wool blankets, thick, scratchy, often damp from the night air. On the worst nights, you pull your cloak over your head and pretend you're somewhere else. Somewhere with heated floors and an actual door that seals. Here's a fringe survival tip you probably weren't expecting. Onions. Some people, especially older women, swear by tucking a raw onion under the bed or into the straw to keep away illness. The logic. Onions pull sickness from the air. There's no science behind it, obviously, but when your entire winter plan is don't die in a pile of people, you take whatever folk remedy you can get. Plus, it's not like the longhouse can smell any worse. One of the quirks of Viking sleep culture is how broken it is. Literally. You don't sleep 8 hours straight. No one does. The cold, the noise, the fire-checking shifts, they all fragment your night into bits. You nap in waves, a few hours, then up for a bit, then back to sleep. During the brief wakeful periods, people whisper stories, tend to children, or stare at the ceiling trying to decide whether they're hungry or just cold. And dreams hit different here. Between the flickering firelight and the wild temperature shifts, your brain cooks up strange visions. You've dreamt of wolves standing at the foot of your bed, of ships moving across snow instead of sea, of ancestors who visit without knocking. Most people shrug off their dreams come morning, but there are always a few who claim to see omens in them, warnings of sickness, signs of coming storms, hints that something beyond the longhouse is stirring. There's always debate about whether those dreams mean anything. Some say the gods speak in sleep. Others say it's just what happens when you fall asleep next to a steaming goat and inhale too much smoke. But you remember them, and that's what sticks. What's interesting is that these beds aren't just for sleeping. During the day they turn into benches, storage platforms, even dining tables in a pinch. You sit on them to mend clothing, sort dried herbs, or carve bits of wood into trinkets and tools. When space is limited, and it always is, you use every surface for everything. Sleep space by night, sewing station by day. Sometimes you sit cross-legged on the straw, back to the wall, trying to warm your hands over a lump of heated stone, while 2 kids nap on your feet and a dog uses your thigh as a pillow. Sleeping is communal in a way modern life just isn't. You don't tuck yourself away in a quiet room with blackout curtains and a sound machine. You fall asleep to someone else's cough, someone else's prayers, someone's off-key humming. It's an orchestra of survival, and your job is to stay warm, stay quiet, and try not to kick anyone who'll remember it in the morning. Some nights, especially when it's below freezing and the wind finds that one damn crack near your bed, you lie awake and fantasize about spring, about green grass and sun on your skin and air that doesn't feel like being slapped. But mostly you stay still. You conserve. Because even movement costs you warmth. Scholars still argue whether Viking sleep was staggered on purpose, whether people took turns in shifts to tend the fire and guard the longhouse. Some believe the sleeping patterns were more organised, with assigned rotations and responsibilities. Others argue it was less structured, more organic. People just slept when they could, where they could, always aware that winter doesn't care about your schedule. The truth probably lies somewhere in between. Like everything in Viking life, sleep was a tool, a means to endure, not a luxury, not a reward, just a way to make it through the night. And tonight, as you burrow deeper into the straw, pressing your back against someone's shoulder and your knees into a fold of wool that might once have been a tunic, you feel the longhouse settle. The fire sighs, the walls creak, and outside the wind howls like something lonely. But in here you are wrapped in people, in fur, in the soft, slow rhythm of survival. You close your eyes, you sleep, you wake, you sleep again. It's not just you in that narrow strip of bed space. There's your sister, snoring softly with her arm flung over your ribs. Your cousin's kid, who somehow kicks like a mule in his sleep, his feet lodged in your back like he's climbing a hill. And next to him, your great-uncle, ancient, half-deaf, probably part frostbite by now, breathing like a winded ox and muttering to himself about fishing lines and dead neighbours. Also, there's a goat, a full-grown goat. You don't even remember when she started sleeping there. Maybe late autumn, maybe last week. No one moved her, so now she's just part of the bed rotation. This is winter sleeping in a Viking longhouse, more like a dense, semi-conscious cuddle pile than anything else. Nobody sleeps alone unless they're being punished, or they're so sick that no one wants to catch it. You sleep stacked and side by side, wool against wool, elbow in someone's armpit, breath mingling in a foggy tangle that hangs in the air until the fire flickers awake and pulls it upward. You learn quickly that proximity is everything. Body heat isn't a bonus, it's the whole point. You want to be close enough to feel someone's back against yours, to draw warmth through layers of fur and cloak. You want to hear their heartbeat, feel their chest rise and fall. It doesn't matter who it is. Friend, cousin, stranger passing through for the season, doesn't matter. If they're warm and not known for wetting the bed, they're welcome. And it's not just people, animals share your space because they're warm too. The line between livestock and family blurs hard in the deep freeze. You've got chickens roosting on overhead beams, a dog curled up by the fire, and that goat, whose name is probably something like Snorer or Fiala, and who chews cud loudly enough to make you reconsider your entire life. In her defence, she's warm, and her body heat makes a big difference when your toes are 2 degrees from falling off. You also have to navigate a completely unique set of night etiquette. For example, there's a sort of bedtime truce. If someone's too cold, they're allowed to wedge themselves into your space, no questions asked. You may wake up with a forehead on your shoulder, or someone's icy hands tucked into your armpits like you're a personal oven. You just accept it. Pretend it's not happening. That's the Viking way. There's an entire hierarchy, unspoken but ironclad. Elders get the centre spot as close to the fire as possible. They've earned it. The sick or nursing mothers go next, cushioned and protected. Young children are tucked between warm bodies like precious cargo. The stronger adults fan out to the edges. Human insulation. You're one of them now. A wall against the winter. And yes, your side gets cold. The kind of cold that crawls into your muscles, stiffens your fingers, and makes you grateful for even the occasional snort of hot breath from Snorer the goat. Still, there's something tender in the whole mess. As much as you joke, as much as you pretend to grumble, you've never felt quite this connected. You know every sleeping sound of your companions. The way your cousin clicks her tongue just before she turns over. The little wheeze the baby makes when he dreams. The moment just before your uncle's snore resets, like a wheel catching on gravel. It's strangely comforting, this patchwork lullaby of survival. You've adapted in ways you didn't expect. You know now how to breathe shallowly when someone's feet are too close to your face. You've perfected the art of shifting just enough to steal heat without waking anyone. And you've developed a sixth sense for blanket politics. When to tug, when to let go, when to sacrifice your portion for the greater good. And because this is still a Viking longhouse, there's always the chance that tonight someone brought home a guest. Maybe a traveller, a skald, a wandering cousin from a neighbouring fjord. They arrive late, stomp snow off their boots, unwrap layers of frozen cloth and scan the dim, crowded room for a corner to collapse into. And everyone just scoots. No fuss, no introductions, just a collective silent agreement. There's always room for one more body. Here's a bizarre little fringe detail for you. Archaeologists have found lice combs buried with Viking remains. Not weapons, not jewellery, lice combs. That tells you everything. You're not just sharing warmth, you're sharing everything. The fire, the straw, the diseases, the smells. You've been itchy for weeks, but so has everyone else, so no one says anything. Grooming becomes a shared ritual when the weather allows. When it doesn't, you scratch silently and keep the peace. Of course, not everyone adjusts so well. Some people don't sleep through the night at all. They fidget, toss, mutter in their sleep. The longhouse amplifies every sound, and when someone wakes, usually to check the fire, to pee outside, or just because sleep won't come back, they often sit by the flames for a while, head in hands, staring into nothing. Insomnia isn't rare. It creeps in like the wind, finds a place near your chest and stays there, whispering old worries. There's debate among historians about the mental toll of these winters. Some argue that seasonal depression was common, exacerbated by close quarters and long nights. Others believe the communal living acted as a buffer. No one was ever truly alone, and that constant human contact may have softened the psychological blow. Still, when you're lying awake between a coughing elder and a flatulent toddler, you feel pretty alone, no matter how crowded it is. And sometimes, especially when the house goes completely quiet, you hear something strange. A creak that doesn't match the wind, a breath that doesn't belong, a whisper that seems too close. Your heart rate picks up. You tell yourself it's just someone shifting, just a dog, just a goat, just the walls settling. But you wonder, and you aren't the only one. In the morning someone else will mention it too, casually, like a joke, but the looks passed around aren't really funny. The sagas talk about spirits that wander in the winter, Draugr, revenants, restless ancestors. Some believe that they're drawn to the warmth of the longhouse, like moths to flame, that if your bed is too near the door, or if you sleep alone, you're more likely to be visited, which is why, even when your sister steals the blanket and your cousin keeps kicking you, you're glad you're not by yourself, so you stay where you are, sandwiched between two snoring humans, half covered in goat hair, your breath fogging up the inside of your blanket. You close your eyes again. Your body aches, your nose is cold, but your core is warm and the fire is still burning. You'll sleep, eventually, and if not, you'll just lie still and listen to the heartbeat of the house, your people, your family, the strangers who've become part of your nights, all breathing in rhythm, wrapped in fur and faith and just enough heat to make it to morning. You don't realise how loud a house full of sleeping Vikings can be until you're trying to fall asleep in one. The first time, you thought the longhouse would settle into peaceful silence as darkness wrapped around it. You were hilariously wrong. It turns out when 30 people, a handful of animals and a dozen ghosts all share the same space, the concept of quiet becomes negotiable. Let's start with the snoring. You'd think one or two people might be the culprits, maybe an elder or a broad-chested man who chopped wood all day and passed out like a log. But no, everyone snores. Even the baby makes tiny wheezing sounds, like a kitten trying to start a fire. There's a rhythm to it. Someone snores in bursts, someone else with long, mournful exhales, and one guy, you think it's your cousin, who manages to whistle through his nose on every inhale like some kind of human kettle. At first, it's maddening. Then, weirdly, you start recognizing people by the sounds they make in sleep. And then there's the wind. Oh, the wind. It doesn't howl so much as moan. It sneaks around the edges of the longhouse like a prowling animal searching for weaknesses. Some nights, it finds one, a tiny crack near the roof or a loose plank near the door, and whistles its victory all the way until dawn. The whole building shudders with each blast. The rafters groan like old bones. You pull your furs tighter, bury your face deeper into the straw and pretend you're not listening. But you are, because sometimes that wind carries more than just cold. It's no secret that Vikings believed in things that walk the night. Spirits, trolls, elves, though not the jolly kind. These elves are sharp-toothed and clever, able to slip through cracks no wider than a knuckle. They whisper in your ears and steal your breath. Some say they press on your chest while you sleep, giving you bad dreams or waking you with a start. Others claim to hear them scratching at the walls, just softly enough to doubt your own ears. You haven't heard that yet, but you're not saying you want to. Instead, you try to focus on the more mundane nighttime noises. The shifting of people as they roll over or fight for more blanket. The soft thud of a limb falling off the platform, followed by a muffled curse and a scuffle back into bed. The drip of melting snow from the thatch into a poorly placed bucket. The gentle burble of something still cooking in the covered pot near the hearth. And, if you're lucky, the voice of a skald, reciting a story too quietly for the kids to wake but just loud enough for the insomniacs to listen. There's something about falling asleep to a story that's older than your bloodline. A tale about a god you're not sure you believe in, or a hero you're pretty sure was made up. The skald's voice is raspy from smoke, low and rhythmic. It blends with the crackling fire and the animal sounds until you can't tell where the words end and the dream begins. You drift. Your body surrenders to the heat trapped in your cloak and the slow rocking of snores and sagas, except when it doesn't. Because sometimes you wake with a jolt, not because of anything obvious, just that subtle, primal something that tugs you out of sleep. The fire is low now, just coals. The room is nearly black, save for a few soft orange glows and the shimmer of moonlight creeping through the smoke hole. You hear breathing, yours and everyone else's, and it feels like the Longhouse is holding its breath right along with you. You listen harder, and that's when you notice the animals. The dog, usually snoring, is suddenly alert. Its ears twitch. It doesn't bark, just lifts its head slowly, tracking something you can't see. The chickens, high above in the beams, ruffle and shift uneasily. Even Snorer, your favourite goat blanket, raises her head and huffs, nostrils flaring. That's when you realise that the house isn't just full of sleepers, it's full of watchers too. Some folks say you're safest in a crowd, that no spirit, no curse, no draugr would dare cross the threshold of a packed longhouse. Too much noise, too many eyes. But others, older, quieter, will warn you that it's the crowd that draws them. All that heat, all that life, all that breath. Like a candle in the dark, flickering just brightly enough to get noticed. You shake the thought off. Probably just wind. Probably. The longhouse has a sound all its own, beyond the human and animal noises. The building breathes. The wood contracts and expands as temperatures shift. It groans, creaks, sometimes cracks so loud you'd swear it split in two. You've learned not to flinch, not to reach for an axe every time the roof shifts. It's just the house, settling. Here's an odd historical tidbit to keep you up tonight. Some longhouses were said to be haunted by house spirits, guardians of the home who punished laziness or disrespect. They weren't evil, necessarily, just moody. Some families left offerings for them near the hearth before bed. Bits of bread, a drop of ale, a whispered thanks. Not everyone did. But those who didn't? Well, let's just say you don't want your blankets mysteriously soaking wet for no reason come morning. There's scholarly disagreement about how seriously these beliefs were taken. Some argue it was metaphor, a way of keeping kids and servants in line. Others point to archaeological finds, strange symbols carved into beams, objects buried beneath the thresholds. Maybe those were just charms, or maybe no one wanted to take chances when the sun wouldn't rise for another 5 hours. Eventually your ears tune out the night sounds. They become part of the background, like waves or rain. You even start to find comfort in them, a sign that life is still moving around you, that you're not alone in the dark. Someone always stirs, someone always shifts, a constant reminder that you're surrounded. And in a weird way, it's those imperfect human noises that keep you calm, not silence. Silence would be terrifying. Silence would mean the fire's gone out, that something happened, that someone, or something, got in. So you adjust your fur, shift your weight without waking the person next to you, and let your body relax. Outside, the wind picks up again, rattling the door on its latch. You hear it thud once, twice, then settle. The dog lies back down. Snorer makes a sound like she's clearing her throat. A child somewhere giggles in their sleep. You smile in the dark. This is sleep, Viking style, loud, crowded, half terrifying, and somehow exactly what you need. You don't change into pyjamas before bed in the Viking world. You don't slip into soft cotton, brush your teeth with minty foam, and settle into a bed scented like lavender. Instead, you sleep in what you wore during the day, unless what you wore during the day was frozen solid or smells like you rolled through the fish-drying shed. Which, honestly, is a real possibility. Viking clothing isn't just fashion or comfort, it's armour against the cold, and you wear it like your life depends on it. Because in winter, it actually might. You sleep in wool, and not just a little wool. You're cocooned in it, wrapped in layers of tunics, cloaks, leg bindings, and maybe even an old mitten with the fingers worn off. Wool is the hero of your closet. It insulates when dry, when wet, when stiff with frost, even when stuffed with straw to plug holes in the walls. It's scratchy, yes, but by this point your skin has given up complaining. It just itches quietly in the background like a roommate you're trying to ignore. Your base layer is a simple linen shift. Soft, maybe, if you're lucky, but usually worn and patched to death. Over that, a long woolen tunic, dyed if you're fancy, undyed if you're not. Your legs are wrapped in trousers made of thick wool or layered strips of cloth called winingas, crisscrossed from ankle to knee. Around your neck, a wool scarf tied tight. On your feet, thick wool socks and leather shoes, unless you took them off and now regret everything. At night you don't strip down, you don't get comfortable, you adjust. You shuffle into a slightly different position, and maybe loosen your belt if you're feeling bold. But mostly you sleep dressed. Because if the fire dies, or the wind finds that one cursed crack in the wall again, or you need to bolt outside to deal with a noise, or worse, a bathroom situation, you want to be ready. And yes, going to the bathroom in the dead of winter is a thing. A horrible thing. There's no chamber pot luxury here, not for the average family. If nature calls in the night, you do what Vikings have always done. You mutter curses under your breath, throw a cloak over your shoulders, and stumble outside half awake, praying not to fall into a snowbank or step on a frozen chicken. But back to sleeping attire. Some people do have a sleeping cloak, one that's kept a little cleaner, maybe lined with fur, maybe inherited from a grandmother who only wore it for Yule nights. It's your prized possession in winter. You don't wear it during the day unless the house is on fire. You fold it carefully, tuck it under your arm, and unfurl it like a holy relic when it's time to sleep. That first moment, when the warm side meets your skin, pure bliss. If you're especially lucky or especially cold, you might borrow or trade for furs. Deer pelts are common, but bear skin, that's prestige. It's heavy, thick, smells like victory, and will keep you sweating even as the wind howls outside. A bear pelt is like sleeping under a small angry mattress. You welcome it. You whisper thank yous to it. But even with all the layers, even with your body heat trapped beneath multiple cloaks and tunics, there are always the exposed parts. Your face, your nose, the tips of your ears. They burn when the cold air touches them, and sometimes you wake with frost-cracked lips or cheeks so numb you can't tell if someone just slapped you. You pull your cloak tighter, bury your face in the crook of your arm, and hope you don't wake up with your eyebrows frozen together again. Viking kids, by the way, have it worse. No one's making them tiny footy pyjamas. They sleep in hand-me-down tunics that barely reach their knees, curling into whatever warm adult they can find. Parents drape cloaks over them, tuck them into the middle of the bed pile, and pray that their little furnace of a child doesn't wiggle out from under the covers in the middle of the night. But they always do, and someone always has to fish them out from the edge of the platform before they roll into the goat pen. Here's a fun fringe fact to ruin sleep for you forever. Lice and fleas? Oh yeah, everywhere. Not just on your body, but in the bedding, in the straw, in the furs. Vikings dealt with parasites constantly. They had combs for lice, yes, but the battle was ongoing. Some nights you scratch and tell yourself it's just the wool. It's not. It's a little army of unwelcome guests partying on your scalp. But hey, at least they're warm too. Some people try to deal with the pest by hanging herbs near the bed. Sweet gale, wormwood, juniper. Not because they believed they smelled nice, though they do. It was thought that the scent would drive away the bugs, or at least confuse them. You sleep with a bundle of dried leaves tied to the post above your head, like some weird anti-itch talisman, hoping it works. Half the time it falls on your face in the night. Startling, but better than lice. There's debate among scholars about how much clothing Vikings actually slept in. Some argue they stripped down to underlayers, especially if their outer tunics were damp or dirty. Others believe full layers stayed on at all times, especially in winter, where any moment spent undressed was a risk. Based on surviving sagas and burial finds, it seems likely that winter sleeping was less about comfort and more about heat management. Cozy wasn't the goal. Not dying was, and that's really the heart of it. You don't sleep in luxury. You sleep like someone preparing for battle. You wear your clothes like armour. You wrap yourself in layers like you're entering a siege. Because you are. The enemy's cold and it wants your fingers and toes first. Still, you find your rhythm. You get used to the stiffness, the itch, the smell. You come to love the weight of the wool pressing down on your legs. The feeling of fabric layered so thick around your body that you forget where you end and the cloak begins. You breathe in smoke and sheep and sweat and you think, yes, this is what warmth feels like. Eventually your eyes grow heavy. The room dims further as the fire shrinks. You can feel your breath warming the tiny pocket of air inside your cloak. It's not luxury, but it's shelter. It's survival. It's what the Vikings knew best. You're half asleep, drifting in that liminal fog between dream and wakefulness, when something shifts at the foot of your bed. A nudge, a weight. Not a person. Too light. Not the dog. Too silent. You crack open one eye, just enough to make out the shape. It's the sheep. Again. She's not supposed to be up here. There's a partition, technically a low wooden divider, that separates the humans from the livestock, but it's more of a suggestion than a boundary. The animals have figured it out. In the bitter depths of winter, nobody follows the rules, not even the sheep. She blinks at you, unbothered, then curls herself up beside your feet like she's always lived there. And honestly, you're not even mad. She's warm, she's quiet, and the heat she gives off is immediate, almost shocking. Within seconds, your frozen toes feel like they've been tucked into a living wool-covered furnace. A bleating, cud-chewing, slightly smelly furnace, but still. Animals and people share the longhouse out of necessity. It's not about affection or convenience. It's about survival. Every body, whether it bleats, moos or snores, adds warmth to the air. The cows, tucked into the corner of the room, give off an astonishing amount of heat. It radiates from their massive forms like living bonfires. Sometimes, when you walk past them in the early morning, your hands outstretched, you can feel the warmth ripple across your palms. You can smell it too. Wet hide, manure, hay, and the sharp, earthy scent of life. The chickens, less helpful in the body heat department, still play their part. They roost in the rafters, little feathered fluffs silhouetted against the smoke-stained ceiling beams. You've heard them shuffle in their sleep, clucking softly like they're dreaming about bugs. Occasionally one loses its balance and flutters down with a surprise squawk, landing in the middle of someone's bed, that someone usually shouts. The chicken is scooped up, redeposited in the rafters, and the house drifts back into its strange, layered peace. The dog, of course, is the real champion. He rotates from bed to bed throughout the night, a free-roaming heat dispenser. Sometimes he curls against your side, his breath tickling your neck, his body a small furnace of muscle and fur. Other times you wake to find him draped across your legs, effectively pinning you in place for the rest of the night. But no one moves him. You just accept it. He's warm. He's loyal. He's been here longer than you. Still, sharing a bed with livestock isn't exactly ideal. They kick, they drool, they fart, loudly and without shame. Once the goat peed in her sleep, and you ended up with a wet corner of fur that haunted your dreams for a week. You learn to sleep lightly, ready to shift at a moment's notice when something with hooves starts shifting dangerously close to your face. But the benefits outweigh the annoyances. That's the math you do every night. A warm sheep at your feet means less chance of frostbite. A snoring dog on your chest means you won't shiver yourself awake every few hours. The longhouse isn't divided into neat, sterile spaces. It's a stew of human and animal, of hay and hearth smoke, of life lived completely entangled. There's a fascinating fringe theory from some researchers that early Viking communities may have elevated animals beyond mere property. Not just in practical terms, but spiritually too. Some oral traditions blur the lines between family and beast. That sheep by your feet might be named after someone's grandmother. The cow in the stall might be believed to carry the spirit of an ancestor. Is it superstition? Maybe. But when you sleep nose to nose with a creature night after night, you can't help but feel a strange bond. Of course, not everyone loves the arrangement. The baby, for example, does not appreciate being awoken by a wandering hen pecking at a loose thread on his blanket. And your mother has strong opinions about the goat being allowed on the bedding, mostly loud ones, expressed in muttered old Norse curses. But even she stops complaining once her feet disappear under a sleeping piglet that wandered in from the far side of the house. And then there's the smell. Let's not pretend otherwise. It's a lot. You've gotten used to it, the same way you stop noticing your own breath in a closed room. But fresh nostrils always recoil. Newcomers gag. The mix of hay, dung, old sweat, smoke and wet fur hits like a punch in the face. But it's also home. The scent of heat and life and the stubborn refusal to freeze. You sometimes wonder what it would be like to sleep in a clean, animal-free space. Just people, just straw, just quiet. But then you remember what that means. Colder nights, less noise, yes, but also less warmth, less comfort. Less of that strange communal heartbeat that seems to pulse through the Longhouse each night. There's scholarly debate about how intentional this integration was. Did Vikings bring the animals in only during the coldest months? Did wealthier families keep separate outbuildings? The records are patchy, the sagas more poetic than practical, but the archaeological evidence, the layout of post holes, the location of hearths, the layers of dung found inside some sites, suggest that the animals lived right alongside their human keepers, not in some distant barn, not down the hill, right here, right now, beside you. And in the quiet of a long night, when you can hear the slow breathing of both man and beast, something settles in your chest. A strange kind of calm. You're part of something bigger. A unit. A herd. A pack. You're warm because of others, and they are warm because of you. Eventually you shift under your blankets, nestle your feet against the sheep's warm flank and close your eyes. She doesn't move, neither do you. The fire pops. The dog huffs in his sleep. The baby murmurs a nonsense word and goes still again. You sleep, wrapped in wool and fur and the heat of animals that know nothing of gods or honour or war. Just warmth and the beating of hearts in the dark. You wake to a familiar glow, that dull, sullen orange of a dying hearth. The fire's low again, barely alive, and the warmth you were wrapped in hours ago has thinned to a ghost. Cold creeps in like smoke under a door, slipping into the folds of your tunic, settling into your joints. Your nose is the first to notice. It always is, numb and wet with frost. You lie there for a moment, eyes half open, debating the ancient question. Do you get up and feed the fire or pretend someone else will? But there's no movement. The house is still except for the sound of soft breathing and the occasional snore. You shift slightly and hear the dog growl. Not an aggressive growl, just a warning, a grumble that says I'm warm, don't even think about moving me. He's planted across your legs like a sack of hot, furry stones. The goat is still curled up at your feet too, and somewhere near your shoulder, your little cousin is using you like a pillow. You know it's your turn. Not officially, of course. There's no chore chart nailed to the wall, but everyone knows. There's a rhythm to these things, an invisible baton passed from one half-asleep body to another. You've been up twice this week. You're overdue. With a groan that might be mistaken for a death rattle, you peel back the fur. Cold air rushes in like it's been waiting for this moment. You immediately regret every choice that's led to this. Still, you wriggle free, careful not to wake anyone, and tiptoe across the icy floor with bare feet because your shoes are somewhere in the dark and probably being used as a pillow by the goat. The hearth glows faintly, a bed of coals and ash, the colour of old blood. You kneel beside it, teeth chattering, and reach for the stack of kindling leaning against the wall. Dry twigs, bark curls, a split log if you can find one small enough to catch. You lay it down carefully, layer by layer, the way you were taught. Small first, then bigger, then biggest. You whisper to it, maybe not with words, but in your head. Come on, catch, wake up. You blow, gently at first, then harder. The ash swirls and lifts, rising like grey ghosts into the dark air. The embers brighten. There it is. A spark. A tiny flame licking up the edge of the bark. You feed it more. You lean in. You blow again. The fire flares, stretching itself awake like a giant after a long nap. You sit back on your heels and watch it grow. The warmth returns slowly. It doesn't rush. It seeps into the room, inch by inch, until the air near the hearth is almost tolerable again. You hold your hands out and watch the red dance across your fingers. Your shadow flickers on the wall behind you, tall and misshapen. For a moment it feels like you've conjured something magical, something sacred, and in a way you have. There's something deeply spiritual about the fire. It's not just practical, it's symbolic. The hearth is the heart of the home, the centre of everything. Meals are made here, stories are told here, babies are born beside it, old men die leaning against it, and in the coldest parts of the year it's the only thing standing between you and death. Some families treat the fire with reverence. You've heard of houses where no one swears near it, where wood is placed on the flame with a murmured blessing. Some even leave offerings, little bits of food, a splash of ale, for the spirits. Not gods exactly, just old presences, housewights, hearth spirits, quiet beings that may or may not exist, but who you don't want to offend just in case. Fringe belief? Maybe. But some days, when the fire roars to life after just a single spark, when the room glows and sighs and the cold is pushed back like a tide, it's hard not to think something else is helping. Still kneeling, you look around the room. The glow has woken some of the others. A baby fusses quietly. A man near the back coughs, deep and wet. Someone stirs, sniffs, rolls over. You can see the outlines of their bodies in the firelight, bundled and still, breathing slow. And then there's movement beside you, a quiet shuffle. It's your aunt wrapped in 3 cloaks blinking at the hearth. She doesn't speak, just nods once and sits down beside you. In her lap she holds a small bundle of dried roots and herbs, wrapped in old cloth. She tosses a pinch into the fire and the smoke changes. It thickens, darkens, fills the room with a smell that's part sweet, part sharp, part something you can't name. A warding smoke, a sleep aid, a little of both. She hums, soft and low, and you realise she's not just adding herbs, she's offering thanks. To the fire maybe, to the house, to whatever still listens in the dark. There's debate among historians whether this sort of ritual was common or just occasional. The sagas mention hearth offerings, but the details are vague. Some say these nighttime wake-ups were just a survival necessity. Others believe they had more meaning, that tending the fire was an act of connection, a moment of communion with the world beyond the walls. A lot of it depends on who you ask, and whether you believe in things you can't see. But belief or not, the fire grows. The room brightens. You can see more now. The gleam of carved tools hanging from the rafters, the shimmer of ice near the door, the slow movement of animals shifting in their pens. The longhouse is coming back to life inch by inch. Your aunt rises, gives you a squeeze on the shoulder, and returns to bed. You stay a little longer, basking in the glow, watching the smoke swirl and fade into the dark above. You've done your part. The fire will last a few more hours now, long enough for everyone to sleep a little deeper, a little warmer. Eventually you rise too. Your feet ache from the cold, but the rest of you is warm. You shuffle back to bed, lifting the furs and sliding in beside your sleeping cousins and animals and gods know who else. The goat sighs as you settle in. You're almost certain she's smiling. The fire crackles behind you. The room hums with soft, steady life, and slowly you drift back into sleep, wrapped in warmth made with your own hands. You dream often in the longhouse, and not always kindly. The fire may warm your body, the furs may shield your limbs, but your mind is free to wander. And when it does, it takes you strange places, places lit by moonlight, filled with howling voices and half-remembered faces. Sometimes it's comforting, other times it's like being dragged into the woods by something with no eyes. You're not alone in this. Everyone dreams here, and everyone talks about them. Well, not always directly. The Vikings didn't see dreams as fluff or nonsense. Dreams had weight, meaning, sometimes even consequences. In the mornings, while the fire is being coaxed back to life and someone is gnawing on last night's cold stew, someone else will mutter, "I saw a black horse last night." The room might fall quiet. Black horses don't mean good things. There's an entire language of symbols, things you don't want to see in your dreams, wolves with no eyes, boats drifting without sails, storms with no thunder. Dreams could be omens, messages, even warnings from the gods or the dead, especially in winter, especially during the long dark nights when the sun barely rises and the world feels thinner, like a veil stretched too tight, ready to tear. You had one last night, didn't you? You saw the sea even though you're nowhere near the shore. You were walking on it like it was frozen glass, and there were footprints ahead of you, giant ones, too wide for any man. And then you woke up cold, throat dry, heart hammering like you'd run 10 miles. You didn't tell anyone, not yet, but you will. In Viking culture, dreams weren't dismissed. They were examined, taken apart. There were dream seers, people with a knack for interpretation, for finding meaning in all that strange night matter. Old women, mostly, with milky eyes and quiet voices who'd sit by the fire and tell you what your dream meant. Sometimes it was comforting. Sometimes it was a death sentence. And some dreams weren't really dreams at all. There's a word, drauga. It means again walker, a restless spirit returned from the grave. In your most vivid nightmares, you see them. Dead men with bloated bodies, skin like frost, eyes like burning coals. They visit you in sleep, or so they say. No one's sure whether it's a dream or something darker. You wake with scratches on your arms, a weight on your chest, the air gone sour, and for the rest of the day, no one meets your eyes. The old woman in the corner of the longhouse, she's seen things. Her eyes are clouded with age and smoke, but she still stares into the fire like it owes her answers. She says dreams run thicker in winter, that the cold wakes old spirits, that the gods grow bored in the long nights and send their thoughts into your head while you sleep. You're not sure you believe her, but you don't not believe her either. There's even a fringe belief, whispered only after dark, that dreams aren't just messages from the gods or visions of the future, but visits from the other versions of yourself, that you walk other paths in your sleep, that in one dream you're already dead, in another you're king, in another you never left your childhood home. You see them all, flickering behind your eyelids like candle flames, and in the morning they fade, but they don't leave. That's why some people wake quiet, not tired exactly, just heavy. You see it in the way they stare into nothing, spoon paused halfway to their mouth. They've been somewhere, and wherever they were, it wasn't here. You've had mornings like that too, when the dream clings like cobwebs, impossible to brush off. The fire doesn't always keep the dreams away. Sometimes it feeds them. Maybe it's the smoke, thick and heavy in the lungs. Maybe it's the herbs someone burned earlier in the night. Or maybe it's the stories. The old tales always return in sleep. Odin wandering in disguise, Loki stirring up trouble, the end of the world called Ragnarok, where the sky splits and wolves swallow the sun. You dream of those stories too. Sometimes you're in them. Sometimes you're watching. You see the great hall burning, the gods falling one by one, the oceans rising. You wake before the end. You always do, and you always wonder what would have happened if you hadn't. Children have their own dreams. They babble about wolves with human faces, boats with sails made of skin, forests that speak in whispers. And no one tells them. It's just your imagination. Because it isn't. Not here. You listen. You nod. You make sure they sleep closer to the fire the next night. And then there are nights when no one dreams. Or at least no one remembers. Those are the best ones. You wake and feel rested. Whole. Like your mind stayed where it was supposed to. You're grateful. You don't say it out loud, but you are. The longhouse breathes easier on those mornings. The air is lighter. Even the animals seem calmer. There's scholarly disagreement on how seriously Vikings took their dreams. Some think the sagas exaggerate the role of omens and prophecy, that most dreams were just dreams. Others argue the opposite, that dreams shaped decisions, influenced battles, guided marriages, and warned of betrayal, that a single dream could change the course of an entire village's fate. But you don't care about academic arguments when you wake in the dark, heart pounding, with the image of a black-eyed man still burned into your mind. He was standing by the fire in your dream, watching you. You're sure of it. And now, the fire crackles in real life, casting long shadows on the wall, and you catch yourself glancing at the same spot, just to be sure he's not still there. Tonight, you'll sleep again. You always do. You have to. But maybe this time you'll tuck a sprig of mugwort under your pillow, or move closer to the old woman with her bundle of protective herbs, or maybe you'll just sleep facing the fire, where the light can keep the worst of it away. Because even in a world of rough wool, cold floors and bleating goats, it's the dreams that get you. Not the cold, not the dark, the dreams. You close your eyes, take a breath, and drift. Again. You're barely awake when the voice begins. Low, steady, almost lost beneath the hum of the fire. It wraps around you before you fully realize it's real. It's not a dream, not this time. It's the skald crouched near the hearth, his shadow long on the wall, his eyes half-lidded, gaze fixed on the flames as if reading from them directly. His voice isn't loud, but it fills the longhouse like smoke, smooth, rhythmic, ancient. He doesn't announce himself. Skalds never do. They just begin, as though the story's been going all along and you've only now tuned in. And in a way that's true. The stories are always there, waiting. They're older than the fire, older than the longhouse, older than you. They live in the bones of this place, in the creaks of the wood, in the hush that falls when everyone realizes he's speaking. Tonight it's a tale of Thor, not the polished version, no thunder god flexing dramatically on a hilltop. No, this is the older Thor, the rougher one, the version who eats goats raw and challenges giants with fists, not wit. The Skald speaks of a journey into Jotunheim, where the snow was deeper than a man's height, and the sky glowed green with frozen breath. Thor faced a beast with 7 heads, each one whispering lies and truths in the same breath. The battle raged for 3 days, and only when Thor smashed the mountain itself did silence return. Your eyes are closed, but you see it all. The hammer, the snow, the roar. You're pulled into it, along with everyone else. Around you, people stir, not awake exactly, but drawn toward the story like moths toward flame. Even the dog lifts his head, ears twitching. Storytelling is sacred here. The sagas aren't entertainment, they're memory, instruction, a compass for survival. In a world where everything changes, weather, food, who lives and who doesn't, the stories are what remain. Skalds carry them not on paper, but in muscle memory, in the way their voices rise and fall, in the cadence that makes you hold your breath without realizing it. The Skald's name is Hjalmar. He's old, though no one's sure how old. His beard is more soot than silver, and his voice has that gravelly edge that makes even the gentlest words feel weighty. He doesn't smile much, but when he tells stories his whole face softens, like the firelight reshapes him. He travels between villages following the seasons, sometimes vanishing for months. No one pays him with coin. He wouldn't take it if you offered. Instead, he eats with you, sleeps near the hearth, listens to your dreams, and then folds them into the stories. Sometimes he weaves real people into the sagas. You once heard your own cousin's name slip into a tale about a hero who tamed a frostbear with a stare. Your cousin beamed for days, told everyone it was true, but it probably wasn't. But that's not the point. Skalds don't just preserve history, they blur the line between myth and reality. In a longhouse lit only by fire, with snow piled against the doors and your breath visible in the air, truth is flexible. If someone says they once saw Odin walking the edge of the woods during a full moon, no one laughs. They nod. Because why wouldn't Odin walk here? Why wouldn't the gods visit? Tonight's story shifts. Hjalm is telling the tale of Hervor, a shield maiden who called her dead father from his grave to claim his cursed sword. She stood among the burning barrows demanding he rise, and when he did he warned her of her doom. Still, she took the sword. Still, she chose her fate. It's a darker story, and the room feels it. People shift. Someone coughs. A baby cries out briefly and is hushed. You feel a weight in your chest, like the story isn't just being told, but aimed. You wonder who in the room needed to hear it, or maybe everyone did. There's a fringe theory that Skalds were more than just storytellers, that they were semi-shamans, keepers of a different kind of knowledge. Not spells, necessarily, but something older. An understanding of people, of symbols, of how a story told at the right time can shift a mood, mend a grudge, warn without accusation. You believe it. You've seen it. A fight softened by a well-timed tale. A fear dispelled by a heroic saga. Hjalmar finishes the story slowly, voice trailing off like the last breath of a song. No dramatic ending, no grand conclusion, just silence, and the fire crackling in its place. No one claps. That would feel wrong. Instead, people breathe out, quiet, content, settled. The longhouse exhales with them. You wonder how many stories have been told here, how many winters they've survived. Some of these sagas are centuries old, passed from one mouth to another like heirlooms. Others are newer, fresh wounds shaped into fables. All of them live here, in the walls, in the smoke, in the pauses between Hjalmar's sentences. You remember being a child, hiding behind your mother's cloak while a Skald told the story of Fenrir, the great wolf fated to kill Odin. You didn't sleep for 3 nights, sure that the wolf's shadow was pacing outside the longhouse. But now, older, You realise that was the point. The stories weren't just to soothe, they were to teach, to prepare, to make fear familiar so it couldn't sneak up on you. Outside, the wind howls, but no one stirs. The story has folded around them like a blanket. Even the animals seem quieter. The dog sighs. The goat chews softly in her sleep. You settle back into your spot, tucking the memory of the saga under your pillow like a secret. Tomorrow someone will repeat it. Not perfectly, not entirely, but enough to pass it on. That's how it works. That's how it's always worked. Hjalmar may not stay the whole winter, but his stories will. They'll linger in the firelight, in the corners of dreams, in the muttered words of children pretending to be heroes. You close your eyes again, and this time, the images in your head aren't nightmares. They're the echoes of Hervar's sword, of Thor's hammer, of wolves and gods and women who defied death itself. They carry you gently into sleep, not to escape the cold, but to walk into something older and deeper than frost. The fire crackles once more. Hjalmar leans back, folds his arms, and stares into the flames like he's listening to the next story, already waiting in the coals. Yule arrives like a warm breath in the dead of winter. Not because the weather softens. It doesn't. If anything, the cold digs in deeper, sharp as a knife against your skin. But Yule isn't about the outside world. It's about what happens inside the Longhouse when the sun barely climbs above the horizon and the dark stretches endlessly in every direction. It's the solstice, the longest night of the year, and the Vikings have no intention of letting it pass quietly. The preparations begin early as anyone can manage when days are 4 hours long and waking up feels like crawling out of a frozen tomb. Still, there's a shift. People move with more purpose. The elders speak in lower tones, and the children buzz with questions they don't know how to ask. You're put to work, of course, scrubbing out the hearth pit, hauling fresh straw, helping gut a pig that's been fattening for months. It's the same hard labour as any other day, but now it has meaning. Now it's for Yule. Yule is more than one night. It stretches across 12 days, or longer, depending on how much food you've got stored and how generous your neighbours are feeling. And those nights are sacred, charged with meaning and superstition. The old woman with the clouded eyes tells you the veil between worlds is thinnest during Yule, that spirits walk, that the dead return to check on the living. So yes, it's a celebration, but it's also a time for watching shadows. That first night everything feels different. The fire is higher, brighter, like it knows it has an audience. The Longhouse is scrubbed as clean as it's going to get, which means less mud on the floor and more herbs hanging from the beams, filling the air with sharp, fragrant smoke. Someone's even lit a tallow candle, rare, precious, and the warm little flame dances in a carved holder near the door. It makes the walls glow like honey, softening the usual harsh lines of winter. There's food, too. Actual food. Rich and greasy and celebratory. The pig is roasted on a spit that turns slowly over the fire, dripping fat into the coals with a hiss. There's bread. Not the flat, stale kind you chew like old leather, but soft, yeasty rounds pulled from hot stones, slathered with butter that's been saved for weeks. There's dried fish soaked back to life, goat cheese wrapped in leaves, and even a few berries pulled from storage and dropped into mead. You eat until you can't move. Then you drink, and drink, and drink. The mead flows freely, not the weak, watery stuff you ration during lean months, but thick, spiced mead made for the occasion. It hits fast. Your limbs go warm, your face flushes, you laugh harder than you should at a joke someone mumbled 2 people away, and when someone picks up a lyre and starts plucking out a tune older than language itself, your foot starts tapping without permission. Yule brings music, rough and wild, not polished, not rehearsed, just rhythms that rise up from clapping hands, stomping boots, and voices straining over each other in messy harmony. The sagas turn into songs. The stories you heard by the hearth the night before become chants, retold and half-invented all over again. Even the shy ones sing tonight, even you, and then come the games. Strength games, drinking games, games with carved tokens and animal bones. You find yourself roped into a round of Hnefatafel, sitting cross-legged on the straw-covered floor, blinking through mead haze at the game board while your opponent, an elder missing 3 fingers and all patience, glares at you like a chess master. You lose. Badly. You lose again. And again. He still grumbles. There's a kind of joy that grows louder the deeper the night goes. It's not polite, not tidy. It's raw and human and desperate. You feel it rising with every chorus, every burst of laughter, every child stumbling past with goat hooves strapped to their feet like a makeshift costume. Someone's banging pots together in rhythm. Someone else is trying to dance, even though the space is too small and the ceiling is too low. You nearly get knocked over 3 times just trying to sip your drink, and you don't care, because tonight, for once, the Longhouse isn't just a shelter. It's a hall, a feast chamber, a place of fire and noise and light. You're not just surviving, you're living. Still, Yule isn't all joy. Not entirely. The stories take a darker turn after midnight. The older ones, the ones about the wild hunt, about Odin riding through the sky with dead warriors in his wake, searching for souls to claim. You listen, quieter now, as the Skuld's voice lowers. He tells you to stay inside after dark, to never answer if you hear your name called from the woods, that some spirits take the shape of friends, that some never left your village to begin with. The youngest kids are ushered to bed around this point, but the rest of you stay near the fire, faces lit orange, eyes wide. The Longhouse feels different now, not smaller, but deeper. Like there's more in it than just people and animals, like the walls are holding secrets, breathing with you, watching. Here's a fringe Yule custom you hadn't heard until now. Some people tie bundles of straw into human shapes, tiny figures with no faces, and hang them near the door. They're not decorations, they're stand-ins, sacrifices in a way. A message to the gods, or to something older that says, we remembered, we honoured. Please pass us by. There's debate over where those bundles came from. Some say they're just fertility charms, leftover symbols from old harvest rites. Others claim they're directly tied to blot sacrifices, blood rituals once practiced openly but now tucked into stories and metaphor. No one admits to making them, but they're always there. You've seen 3 tonight, all swinging slightly whenever the wind pushes through the gaps in the wall. Eventually the songs slow, the fire dims again, someone falls asleep with a cup in their hand, someone else mutters a prayer over the ashes. You lie back, head resting on someone's thigh, your belly full and your limbs heavy, and for the first time in what feels like weeks, you're not cold. Yule reminds you why you endure the rest of the winter. It's not just survival, it's togetherness, celebration, the refusal to go quietly into the frost. It's the one time each year where the Longhouse feels less like a bunker and more like a temple, a beating heart in the middle of the frozen world. You fall asleep that night with music still echoing in your ears, the scent of smoke and pork clings to your tunic, the fire glows soft like an ember about to bloom. Outside the snow keeps falling, but in here, for tonight at least, the dark has no power. You wake up sweating, not just warm, sweating. Your tunic clings to your skin, your neck is damp and your legs are twisted awkwardly in your cloak. The fire is still burning high and greedy, the embers glowing like rubies. Someone must have overfed it after the Yule games. Maybe out of excitement, maybe out of spite, or maybe they were just cold and drunk and flung a whole log into the pit without thinking about what would happen 6 hours later. The air is thick, smoky. You cough once, pull your blanket off your shoulders, and immediately regret it as cold air slices in from the edge of the Longhouse. The temperature difference hits you hard, boiling 1 second, freezing the next. You sit up and fan your tunic with your hands, trying to cool yourself without actually having to move. It's a delicate balance, being too hot and still somehow cold underneath. Someone else groans nearby, a mead hangover kind of groan. Across the room, someone is already up, poking the fire with a stick and mumbling about needing air. The Longhouse smells like burned meat, sweat, and singed goat hair. You wouldn't call it refreshing, but you've lived with worse. It's the aftermath of celebration, and with it comes a return to winter's edge. The embers might still glow, but the cold waits patiently beyond them, never far, never done. The air near the walls is already icing over again, frost forming in delicate little ferns along the inner beams. The roof sighs beneath the weight of snow, and a slow creaking noise reminds everyone that heavy snow and an old thatch roof don't always get along, so you get to work. Because this is what follows joy: repair, tending, adjustment. You and 2 others climb onto the sleeping platform to check the ceiling. The roof beams groan under your feet. You push up at the sagging places, brushing loose straw away and checking for leaks. There's a place near the centre where snow has melted slightly and dripped in. Just a steady plip, plip, plip. You shove a wad of wool into the crack, say a quiet prayer to whatever will listen, and promise to check it again tomorrow. Then it's insulation duty. A younger cousin is stuffing dried moss and sheep's wool into wool gaps, grunting each time a frigid breeze brushes his fingers. There's no such thing as perfect insulation here. It's more like damage control. You plug what you can, you patch the rest. You try not to take it personally when the cold finds its way in anyway. And because things are getting serious again, it's time to break out the furnace hacks. The oldest trick is the hot stone. You heat a flat stone in the fire until it glows, let it cool just enough to not ignite the bedding, then wrap it in wool and tuck it under the straw mattress. If you do it right, it radiates warmth for hours. If you do it wrong, you scorch your thigh and set the straw smouldering. You've done both. There's also the onion trick. Weird, sure, but folk wisdom says sleeping with a warm onion under the bed draws out the dampness and helps prevent chills. No one really knows how it works. Or if it does. But you've got onions, and you've got dampness, so why not? Another method, one you learned from a visitor passing through last year, involves layering your clothes backward. The logic: wearing them the wrong way traps heat differently. Honestly, it sounds ridiculous, but when it's midnight your feet are blocks of ice, and the wind is howling like a cursed soul outside, you'll try anything. You've seen people tie scraps of sheepskin around their ankles, under their clothes like secret foot mittens. Some sleep with stones wrapped in fur against their belly. Others curl into fetal positions under two cloaks and refuse to move until morning. Here's a fringe method only the oldest folks whisper about: ash bedding. The idea is to gather warm ashes, still glowing, but no flame, wrap them in cloth, and tuck them into the bedding. Dangerous? Absolutely. But according to one elder, her grandmother used to do it every winter and no one ever caught fire, not once. Which is an interesting way of saying almost did. Some families store bricks or small stones near the fire during the day, warming them gradually. Come nightfall, each person gets one. You place it near your chest or at your feet, and cling to it like it's a lover returning from war. The heat doesn't last long, but sometimes that extra hour of warmth is the difference between sleep and shivering. Still, all the hacks in the world can't stop the frost from creeping in. The wind finds the gaps, the snow presses harder on the roof, and the breath in the air gets thicker. You can see it, misty puffs rising from the lips of everyone still asleep, hanging like ghosts above the bedding before vanishing into the beams. There's debate among historians over just how brutal these winters really were. Some believe the Viking Age overlapped with a period of unusually cold climate, the late antique Little Ice Age they call it, where temperatures were harsher and growing seasons shorter. Others say the sagas exaggerated, that the Norse people weren't facing constant apocalyptic cold, but rather learned to endure with efficiency and shared knowledge. Still, the archaeological evidence doesn't lie. Thick walls, layered floors, central hearths, massive stores of fuel. These people expected the worst and planned accordingly, and you're glad they did, because on nights like this, when the fire flares too high, then dips too low, when the roof groans like it might come down in one great snowy sigh, when the wind pushes against the longhouse like a drunk trying to force the door open, you feel it in your bones, how close the edge really is. So you make another round. You check the fire again. You turn the stone at your feet, rewrap it, slide it down toward your ankles. You pull the furs tighter. The goat grumbles. The dog thumps his tail once and sighs. The baby in the far corner cries out softly in a dream, and someone soothes her back into silence. You lie back down, one arm under your head, the other curled around your ribs, trapping heat where you can, and you wait for the warmth to come back. It will, slowly. It always does. You don't sleep yet, not just yet. You listen. You listen to the wind, to the embers, to the house groaning softly under its own age and weight, and you remind yourself, winter doesn't win. Not tonight. Not while the fire still lives. Not while you know how to stay warm. The roof breathes with the snow. It's subtle at first, a faint shifting sound, like a giant rolling over in its sleep. But you've lived in this longhouse long enough to know what it means. The weight is building. Inch by inch, flake by flake, winter is pressing down harder now. Every gust of wind adds more to the thatch above, piling thick and heavy across the slope of the roof until the beams creak in protest. It sounds like the house is sighing, not from weakness, from endurance. You lie still, eyes open in the dark, listening. You can tell from the tone of the creaks what kind of snow it is. Light fluffy powder barely registers, but this is the wet stuff. The kind that sticks, packs, clings. The kind that breaks trees and buries doorways. The kind that makes grown men sit bolt upright at midnight and say, "We'll need to shovel at first light." You feel the weight above you in your chest. Not literally, yet, but in your thoughts. In the way people wake earlier and speak less. In the way the fire is fed more often and the children are shushed faster. Everyone's watching the ceiling. No one says it aloud, but you all know the truth. If enough snow falls, if the beams are too old or the angle wrong or the thatch too damp, the roof can collapse. It's happened before. Your grandfather told you the story, quiet and grim, one night after a storm. A neighbouring village 3 valleys away, midwinter, a sagging roof, a longhouse buried in the night. They didn't dig them out for 3 days. Some lived, some didn't. After he finished the story, he stood and checked the ceiling himself, as if his words might have summoned snow. So now you all check, constantly. One man pulls down the ladder and climbs into the loft with a torch to check the supports. Another drags a long stick outside to poke and prod from the snow-covered path, knocking snow off the lower edge before it freezes into ice dams. You take your turn too, bundling up and heading into the whiteout with a shovel and your thickest wool mittens, your breath freezing in mid-air before your boots even leave the doorstep. Outside, the house looks half buried. Snow curves up along the walls like a wave ready to crash. The smoke hole is still open, barely, puffing lazy wisps of grey into the pale sky. You hear the soft thump of snow sliding from the eaves each time someone inside stirs. You shovel it away from the entrance, then circle the structure, knocking snow loose with practiced swings, carving breathing room around the house like a surgeon clearing frostbitten tissue. The cold burns your face, and even wrapped in 3 layers of wool, your knees ache with every crouch. But you keep moving, because if you stop, the snow wins. Back inside, it's warmer, but the tension hasn't thawed. The fire is high again, roaring this time, and people are packed closer to it than usual. You shake snow from your shoulders and kneel to dry your gloves by the hearth, glancing up at the beams. They're slick with condensation now, long dark streaks of moisture trickling down the wood. Not a good sign. It means the roof is sweating, or crying. You lie back down eventually when your limbs stop trembling. You try to rest, but sleep won't come easy. The weight above is psychological now, pressing down through memory, through fear. You wonder how many winters the roof has held, how many more it can take. You tell yourself the builders knew what they were doing, that the walls are thick, the beams sturdy, the rafters angled perfectly to shed the snow, but perfect doesn't always matter when the storm is bigger than the plan. You pull the blanket higher, the fire crackles a bit too loud. You look up again, instinctively, still there, still solid, still holding. Others are awake too. You hear whispered voices, someone passing a mug of warm ale, a couple taking turns rubbing their son's feet to make sure his toes stay pink. Everyone is alert, but no one panics. This isn't your first storm. And the house, despite the age and the drafts and the creaking, has never failed you before. There's an odd comfort in the shared anxiety. Everyone in the same room, everyone listening for the same noises. You can feel the unity in it, even if no one says it. The Viking Longhouse was designed for this, for togetherness in the face of danger. You survive by trusting the people next to you, by watching the ceiling and stoking the fire, and making sure your neighbour's blanket hasn't slipped off their shoulders in the night. And still, your mind drifts. What if it did collapse? What would it sound like? A crack? A roar? Would there be time to move? Would the fire go out instantly or burn brighter for one blinding moment before being smothered in snow and thatch? You shake the thoughts away, but they linger like the chill on your fingertips. Some people think the house itself is alive, not just metaphorically. They talk about it like a being, a guardian. The sagas sometimes describe longhouses as creatures, their doors as mouths, their smoke holes as eyes. The fire is the soul, the beams are ribs. If you treat it well, it protects you. If you neglect it, it fails you. Fringe thinking? Maybe. But right now, as you lie under its groaning roof, you whisper a silent promise. Hold. Just one more night, then another, and another after that. There's scholarly debate about how accurate Viking sagas are when describing these kinds of winter crises. Some believe the dramatic tension is just that, drama. Others argue that roof collapses, fire accidents, and starvation were far more common than the stories admit. That survival in these longhouses wasn't just hard, it was a constant gamble. That winter didn't respect effort. It respected luck. You prefer to believe in both. That effort matters. That craftsmanship counts. But also that sometimes you need a little help from the gods, or at least from the wood spirits watching silently from the rafters. The fire burns lower now, casting long shadows. The ceiling groans again, a long, slow exhale like the house is adjusting itself on sore joints. You don't flinch this time. You just breathe with it. In, out. The rhythm of survival. And eventually you fall asleep. Not because you're warm, not because you're unafraid, but because you're too tired not to. The body gives in where the mind cannot. You sleep under a roof sagging with snow, surrounded by strangers who've become family, animals who've become guardians, and stories that live in the beams above your head. The house holds. You don't go outside after dark unless you absolutely have to, and if you do, you go fast. You go prepared. You say a quick prayer, maybe to Thor if you're feeling practical, or to Odin if you're feeling brave, or to no one at all if you're just too tired to think straight. But you say something, because leaving the warmth of the longhouse for the frozen void outside is no small thing. It's not just about the cold, it's what's in the cold, or what might be. Tonight, unfortunately, you have to go. Your bladder isn't interested in superstition, or caution, or survival stories about men who wandered into snowstorms and never came back. It has its own priorities, and you've reached the point where it's either risk frostbite or risk losing all your dignity and most of your bedding. So you groan, quietly, so no one mocks you, and slip out from under the furs. Immediately the air slams into you. It's not just cold, it's a living thing. A slap across the face, a snake down your back. You hiss through your teeth and try to move fast, grabbing your boots, throwing your thickest cloak over your shoulders, fumbling in the dark for the latch. The door sticks. Of course it does. Ice in the hinges again. You push harder, shoulder against the wood, and it gives with a shudder, letting in a blade of winter that cuts through the entire longhouse like a scythe. Everyone grumbles, someone swears, the dog growls like you've insulted his ancestors. You mutter an apology and slip through the gap, closing the door fast behind you. Outside it's silent. Not quiet. Silent. The kind of silence that makes your ears ring. The snow absorbs everything. Your footsteps, your breath, even your thoughts. The moon is half shrouded behind a thick veil of cloud, throwing just enough light to reveal the contours of the path ahead. The lean of the fence posts, the frost-laced edges of the nearby trees. Everything is ghost-coloured. You know the path by heart. A few paces to the right, past the log pile, then behind the outbuilding where the wind doesn't hit as hard. That's your spot. That's everyone's spot. The midnight business zone. You step quickly, boots crunching through the packed snow. Every sound is louder out here. Exaggerated. You're suddenly hyper-aware of your own breathing. You glance behind you, just once. The longhouse glows softly in the dark, smoke rising from the hole in the roof like a tether to life itself. You hadn't realised how much light the fire cast until now. Without it, the world looks drained, like it's holding its breath. You hurry to finish your task, shifting from foot to foot, muttering curses at the cold, at your bladder, at the ancestors who didn't invent indoor plumbing. Then you hear it. It's nothing, probably. Just wind in the trees, but it doesn't sound like wind. It sounds like breathing. Heavy, measured, close. You freeze mid-step, turn slowly. Nothing. You squint at the tree line. No movement. No shapes. But the hairs on the back of your neck are up, and your gut has gone tight. You can't explain it, but you feel watched. Not in a friendly neighbour way, in a something hungry and patient way. You take 2 steps back toward the longhouse, then 3 more, faster. The snow creaks louder beneath your boots. Your heart is thudding. You don't run, not yet. But every instinct you have is urging you to get back inside. There's a legend, whispered during Yule but believed all winter long, of the Ulfhedna, wolf spirits who walk the woods during the darkest nights. Not just men in wolfskins like the warriors who claim their power in battle. These are different, older, shadows wearing flesh drawn to warmth, to breath, to the sound of a heartbeat alone in the dark. You don't believe in them, not really, but you don't disbelieve either. You reach the door and fumble with the latch, fingers numb, breath clouding your vision. You bang your shoulder against it once, twice, and it finally swings open. You slide inside and slam it shut, hard enough that the beams tremble. The sudden noise wakes half the room. A child cries out. The dog barks. Someone swears again, louder this time. You stagger back to your bedding, ignoring the glares, pulling your furs over your head as fast as possible, shaking from something that isn't entirely the cold. A voice next to you, low and half asleep, mutters, "What did you see?" You hesitate, then nothing. "Thought so," they say. But they shift closer anyway, just in case. There's a strange kind of trust in a room full of half-sleeping people. No one judges you for coming back pale. No one mocks you for looking behind you a few too many times. Everyone knows. They've all been out there. They've all felt it. The dark beyond the fire. The thing in the trees. You lie awake a little longer, eyes wide in the dark, heart still thudding. You listen to the wind. Try to convince yourself it was just a tree, or an animal, or nothing at all, but a part of you. The old part. The part that knows what it's like to huddle in a house made of timber and turf while the sky tries to eat you. Whispers that it wasn't nothing. Here's a fringe belief that doesn't make it into the sagas much. Some Viking families buried charms at their doorways to keep spirits out. Smooth stones painted with runes, animal bones, braids of hair tied with red thread. You've seen one tucked beneath the threshold of an old longhouse up the valley. You never asked about it. You didn't want to hear the answer. There's scholarly debate about just how serious Vikings were about the creatures in the woods. Some say it was all metaphor, stories to explain the unknown. Others argue the fear was real, rooted in generations of oral history and environmental threat. After all, when your world is this cold, this dark, and this dangerous, it doesn't take much for shadows to grow teeth. You roll onto your side and stare into the firelight, willing it to stay high, to burn through the night. Sleep comes slowly, but it comes. And when you dream, you're back outside again. Only this time you don't make it to the door. You wake with the taste of metal in your mouth, not blood. Something stranger, like iron left in the rain, or the smell of old stone. Your head aches, not from mead or sleep, but from something deeper, something buzzing in your bones. Around you, the longhouse is still sleeping, or pretending to. The fire's low again, barely holding on, and the light that spills across the walls is thin, reluctant. It's not dawn, not really. It's that liminal time before the sky changes, when the night just starts to loosen its grip, and you feel wrong. Your chest is heavy, your breath short, and your limbs feel weighted. You try to sit up and can't. Not right away, not like usual. You blink and the ceiling swims, warping like it's too close and too far all at once. You hear someone stirring nearby, their breath catching like they're choking on smoke. Then another, and another. Something is off. They say the air gets strange before illness spreads, that you can taste it, feel it in the way the fire won't catch or the bread won't rise, that the goats get restless, the milk turns sour, and people stop dreaming, or start dreaming too much. You've heard these stories before, rolled your eyes at them, like any sane person would. But now, lying here with your skin clammy and your mouth dry and your thoughts sluggish, you start to wonder, what if it's true? An elder groans behind you, then falls silent. You don't turn to look. You don't want to. The others are waking now, slowly, with grunts and coughs and groggy mumbles. One woman mutters something under her breath, a prayer, a curse, maybe both, and that's when someone says the word, quietly, but not quietly enough. Elves! It cuts through the morning like a knife. Not Santa elves, obviously, not the little jingly kind with bells on their shoes. Viking elves, Alfar, are different, older, stranger, unknowable. They're not cute. They're dangerous. Beautiful, yes, but in the way wild animals are beautiful. And like wild animals, you don't want them in your house. You've heard the term before, Alpha Breca, the elf slope, places in the woods you're not supposed to walk, not because you'll get lost, because you might get seen, and worse, noticed. The elves in the old stories don't kill you exactly. They steal your breath, your health, your luck. They send strange sleep, lingering illness, waking nightmares. They bring what some call elf shot, invisible wounds that no healer can find. And this feels like elf shot. Your aunt thinks it's a fever. She's already dragging out her stash of dried herbs and goat fat, muttering about a poultice. Someone else blames the mead from Yule. One younger man insists it's just bad air from the fire burning too low. but the way he's clutching his side suggests he doesn't quite believe himself. You overhear your grandmother whisper to the dog, "They walked last night." Her voice is hoarse. "They came through." No one argues. That's the scariest part. There's an eerie sort of agreement. No loud panic, no screaming, just a slow, quiet tension, like the moment before a storm hits. You all know what this could be. You've heard the stories your whole life, of entire houses falling ill overnight, of children never waking, of dreams that turn to whispers, then to silence. You get up finally. Your legs are shaking, your breath still shallow. The air inside feels thick, like it's been used up. You move toward the door and step outside, needing air that hasn't been inside 1,000 lungs. The snow is blinding, clean, untouched. And suddenly, that's part of the fear. It's too clean. No tracks, not a single footprint near the longhouse. Not from goats, not from dogs, not from the restless child who always sneaks out to eat snow. Nothing. Like the world was wiped smooth in the night. You return inside, brushing the frost from your shoulders. A woman sitting by the fire is heating stones and oil in a carved dish. She's the unofficial healer, barely old enough to be called a woman really, but already grey at the temples. She dips a cloth into the warm mix and starts pressing it gently to a sick man's chest. "If it's elf shot," she says softly, the warmth draws it out. You don't ask how she knows. Everyone knows someone who's seen it. There's an old belief, fringe now, but it used to be common, that sickness could be shot into the body like an arrow. Invisible, but real. The Alfar were blamed, or sometimes the Vetir, spirits of the land, if you'd built something where you shouldn't have. A barn on sacred earth, a fence across an old path, a privy dug into ground that didn't want to be disturbed. If you offended them, they'd strike back, not with lightning, with slow ruin. A few people sleep on untouched. Not because they're stronger, but because they haven't been seen. Not yet. You envy them, even as you side-eye them, wondering if they'll wake up later with the same weight in their chest, or not at all. You go through the motions, feed the fire, boil water, chew a few leaves that are supposed to restore clarity, though they taste like dirt and regret. Everyone is trying something. Salves, smoke, salt under the tongue. You even hear one man mumbling charms into his bowl of porridge before eating. No one judges. Whatever works. There's a debate brewing in the corner of the room, whether to call for a Vulva, a Seeress, a woman trained to walk between worlds, to speak with spirits, to undo what shouldn't have been done. They don't live in every village. They travel, often in solitude, and they don't come cheap. Some are feared more than respected. Some are frauds. But some are the real thing. And when things like this happen, people call for them. But until then, you just wait. Hope it passes. Keep the fire fed and the room clean and the bedding dry. You hang extra bundles of herbs by the door. You burn juniper and chant old words, even if you don't understand them, even if no one's sure they ever meant anything at all. Because when the breath goes heavy and the dreams go strange and the snow outside looks too smooth, you do what you have to. And tonight, you'll sleep again, but with a stone at your chest and a knife under your pillow, just in case. You wake up with a warrior snoring beside you. Not just a light, polite snore. No, this is the kind of snoring that sounds like someone trying to clear a logjam with their lungs. It rattles the straw under your bed, echoes through the beams above and sets off the chickens. Again. You shift slightly, hoping not to disturb him, though there's very little chance of that. He could probably sleep through a raid. His name is Bjorn, and he just returned from one. He came back 2 nights ago, just after the Yule fire burned down to embers. Snow still clung to his beard when he stepped through the longhouse door, dragging 2 packs, a dented shield, and a shoulder wound that smelled like spoiled milk. He didn't speak for hours, just sat by the fire unblinking like he wasn't sure he'd really made it home. Someone handed him a bowl of stew, someone else poured him a drink, and now there he is, sleeping 2 feet from you, wrapped in a crusty wolfskin cloak that's seen more blood than snow this year. Warriors have a strange gravity in the longhouse. They don't ask for space, they create it. The others shift around them instinctively, make room without being told. Not out of fear, exactly, but out of respect. You don't crowd a man who spent 3 months sleeping in mud and waking to sword blades. You let him stretch, let him snore. And still, you're curious. Everyone is. The children gather near him when they think he's not listening, wide-eyed and whispering. They ask about England, about how many he killed. about whether he saw monks with bald heads and gold rings. Bjorn doesn't answer, not directly, but sometimes late at night he mumbles in his sleep, words you don't understand. Foreign words, names maybe, or curses. The adults don't ask him anything, they already know. What it takes, what it costs. A successful raid means you come back heavier, with silver, with tools, maybe with stories, but also with scars, inside and out. And Bjorn is carrying both. His eyes look far away, even when he's staring into the fire, like he left something out there, or left part of himself. You try not to stare at his hands, but you do. You've seen scars before, but not like these, deep, jagged, layered, like his hands were chewed and spit back out. He sleeps with them tucked under his chest now, curled tight, as if he's still holding something, a hilt, a memory, a ghost. One of the other warriors, older, quieter, sits near him during the day, sharpening blades and pretending not to notice when Bjorn flinches at sudden noises. They talk sometimes, barely above whispers. You catch fragments. Fire trap, dogs, wrong turn, priest's eyes, and then nothing. No one presses for more, not because they're disinterested, but because they understand that some stories aren't told with words. They show up in the way a man grips his cup, in the way he watches the door, in the way he startles when someone slams a pot too hard near the hearth. Sleeping beside a warrior is educational. For one thing, he moves like he's still on a battlefield. You were nearly elbowed in the face last night when he rolled over. He keeps one hand on his knife even in sleep. It rests under his cloak, just below his ribs, and you can see the outline of it, always ready. Even the dog doesn't nuzzle too close. He knows better. But the strangest thing, you feel safer. Like if something came through the door, wolf, man, or spirit, he'd be the first to stand. And whatever it was, it would have a bad night. Here's something you didn't expect. Warriors talk in their sleep. Not just grunts or mumbles, but full-on conversations with people who aren't there. Sometimes in Norse, sometimes in other languages. Frankish, maybe, or Saxon. He laughs once. A sharp, joyless bark that wakes half the room. Another time he whispers a name over and over. You don't recognize it, and you don't ask. There's a fringe belief that warriors carry more than memories when they return. That ghosts cling to them, not just of the people they killed, but of the places they've been. The blood, the smoke, the sea, the sound of men dying under grey skies. These things attach, linger, sink into the skin and ride home like barnacles on a hull. You believe it now. You've felt the air around him change. You've seen the way the fire crackles higher when he walks by, the way the children stop laughing when he enters a room. He doesn't speak often, but when he does, everyone listens. Not because of volume, because of weight. He finally spoke to you this morning, just 2 words. Good fire. That was it. But coming from him, it felt like a blessing, like a mountain looked down and said, "Well done, little stone." There's debate among scholars about how these raiders were treated at home. Some think they were glorified, lifted up as heroes and rewarded with land and wives and feasts. Others believe they were isolated, respected, yes, but never quite welcomed back. Changed too much, too different, too dangerous. Maybe both are true. Maybe it depends on what a man brings home and what he leaves behind. Bjorn hasn't said how long he'll stay, maybe until spring, maybe just long enough to rest his leg and warm his bones. But for now, he's part of the Longhouse, part of your nights, and sharing space with someone like him changes things. You sleep more lightly, not because you feel unsafe, but because you're watching him the way you'd watch a wolf that's decided to curl up by your fire. You're grateful for the protection, but you don't forget what he is. He snores again, shifting under his furs. His cloak falls open slightly, revealing a pendant tucked under his tunic, a carved wooden hammer, the kind worn for Thor's favour. It's worn smooth at the edges, fingered too often, clutched too tightly. He might not talk to the gods, but he's definitely held them, maybe begged them. You wonder what they said back. That night you lie a little closer than usual, even though he kicks, even though he growls in his dreams, because if the Longhouse walls ever failed, and the door ever cracked open with something on the other side, you know who would rise first, and you know who'd stand behind him. In the Longhouse, life and death are never more than a few feet apart. You don't talk about it directly. It feels too heavy, too final, but everyone knows. You can feel it in the way people move around the hearth, in how they pause when they pass the older ones, how they hush when a baby wheezes in its sleep. Death is always present here, not in a grim, looming way, but in a constant, familiar one. Like an old neighbour you don't particularly like but still invite to dinner because that's just how it is. Last night someone was born. It started with a grunt in the dark, then a soft call for help. No drama, no screaming, just quiet, practiced urgency. Within minutes, 3 women were kneeling in the straw near the fire, hands steady, voices calm, eyes sharp. You rolled over to watch, like most others did, half curious, half afraid. Births are powerful here. Not rare, but always dangerous. A beginning, but one that leans dangerously close to an ending. The baby came just before dawn, slick and red and howling, and the sound of that first cry was like thunder cracking inside the walls. It startled the chickens. The goat bellowed. Someone cheered, softly. And just like that, the longhouse gained a new heartbeat. The baby is wrapped in fur now, tucked against its mother's chest like a coal being banked for later. Her face is grey with exhaustion, but she smiles when the firelight catches her eyes. The midwife nods in that quiet, satisfied way that says, "This one made it." Not all do. No one says that out loud, of course, but everyone's thinking it. And now, tonight, only a few feet from that new life, someone else is dying. He's old. So old that no one remembers a time when he wasn't old. You've only ever known him as a bundle of skin and bones wrapped in wool, with a voice like bark and hands like twigs. He used to sit by the door, carving bone into beads, telling stories so slowly you'd forget where they started before he got to the end. Now he lies on the platform closest to the fire, too weak to lift his head. His breathing is shallow, uneven. No one says it aloud, but the fire's been kept higher tonight because of him. He's being given the best heat, the warmest furs, the softest herbs boiled in water and spooned into his mouth. His daughter sings under her breath, a tune you've never heard before, a lullaby maybe, or a farewell. You watch from across the room. Everyone does. Not directly, not rudely, but often. Eyes drift toward him. Voices soften when they pass. The longhouse shifts to accommodate the moment. Life compresses, becomes gentle, still. You remember when his wife died 3 winters ago, right in this same spot, right beside that fire. She slipped away just before morning, and the next night he sat in the exact place she died, staring into the flames and murmuring to her in the silence. No one stopped him. That was his right. He has no more words tonight, just breath, just time. Not much. There's a strange peace in it. Not everyone gets that. Some go in fever, in blood, in panic. But he's going like a candle, burning down, not out. And everyone treats him like a man already halfway gone. Not with fear, with reverence, as if he's sitting beside the gods already and just hasn't realised it yet. Here's an odd little truth that never makes it into the romantic Viking tales. Death happens where you sleep, right next to where you eat, where you laugh, where you dream. There are no clean lines, no walls to separate the sacred from the everyday. Someone gives birth in the straw. Someone else coughs out their last breath in the same bed where you laid the night before. You learn to live with it. You have to. There's a fringe belief, still alive in the northern fjords, that a longhouse remembers its dead. Not just the famous ones, all of them. That the walls retain the final breath of anyone who dies within them. That's why some people whisper apologies to the beams when they spill stew or swear too loud. Not because they're superstitious, well, not only, but because they know who's listening. The dead aren't far, never are. You feel it now, that hush in the air, the kind that makes the fire flicker smaller, the kind that slows your own heartbeat, even when you're not sure why. It's happening. Someone leans down beside the old man, his daughter. She touches his face gently. His mouth moves. One final breath, barely audible. Then nothing. You know it before she says anything. The room does too, and he's gone. There's no scream, no sobbing, just stillness. She pulls the blanket up over his chest, closes his eyes, and rests her forehead against his for a long moment. Then she nods once to the others. That's it. That's the end. A few people quietly begin preparing the body. It's done with care, almost ceremony. The old rules are followed, arms crossed, legs straightened, the small hammer symbol placed on his chest. His boots too, because you never walk barefoot into the next world. Later, when the weather allows, he'll be buried properly, or maybe burned if the family chooses. But for now, he stays here, among you. You'll sleep beside him tonight. Not out of morbid curiosity, but out of tradition. He's still part of the Longhouse until he's taken out through the spirit door, a special exit different from the one the living use. That's to confuse the dead, to make sure they don't come back. You lie down, heart heavy, eyes fixed on the ceiling beams. The fire is quiet now. The baby stirs in its sleep, letting out a little hiccup of sound, and someone laughs softly, a wet laugh through tears. One life in, one life out. That's how it works here. In this space, nothing is wasted, not breath, not memory, not death. You learn to share the floor with it all, to fold your dreams around it, to accept that when you wake, someone new might be here, and someone else might not. You sleep that night with the faint scent of boiling herbs in your nose, the soft rustle of blankets nearby, and the awareness that you are never alone. Not in life, not in death, not in the space in between. You wake in the middle of the night to silence. Not the usual hush of sleeping bodies and low embers, but a perfect silence. A silence that feels wrong. It's the kind of quiet that presses against your ears, like the world has stopped breathing. You hold still, eyes open in the dark, heart picking up its pace. No snoring, no rustling, not even the dog shifting in his sleep. It's as if the Longhouse itself has paused, and you realize no one's alone, not here, not ever, not by choice. Even when you're sleeping, there's always someone within arm's reach, always the rise and fall of a dozen bodies breathing in rhythm, always warmth to steal, space to defend, limbs to avoid. The Longhouse is a constant press of humanity, but now, in the deep, unlit hours, you think of something that no one dares to say aloud during winter. Why doesn't anyone sleep alone? It isn't just because it's cold. Sure, body heat is practical, obvious, logical, but it's also something deeper, older. You feel it now, lying on your side, eyes fixed on the glowing coals. That primal unease that trickles down your spine when you're alone for too long, when the fire's too low, when the air feels too still. Being alone in winter, it opens a door, not just in your mind, but in the world. There's a reason the oldest among you never sleep far from the hearth, why the youngest are always tucked between two warm bodies, why, even when arguments break out or couples fight or someone smells especially offensive after a hard day, no one chooses to sleep by the wall, by the door, or, God's forbid, in a corner. That's where the shadows gather. You've seen it once before. 2 winters ago, a man returned from a failed fishing trip, cold and furious and full of pride. He refused to share space with the others, said he needed room, said he wanted peace. He dragged his bedding to the far end of the Longhouse by the west wall, furthest from the fire. The next morning he was gone, not dead, not wounded, just gone. The bed was still warm, his boots were still there, but no sign of him, no trail outside, no prints in the snow, as if the Longhouse had exhaled and he'd been carried off with the breath. No one talks about it now, not directly, but no one's slept by that wall since. Even the goats avoid it. You shift closer to your sister, gently, careful not to wake her. She mutters something and turns over, wrapping an arm around your waist. Her breath hits the back of your neck, warm and a little sour, and you don't mind. It's human, alive, present, exactly what you need. Because what waits in the dark is not. There's a strange logic in Viking fear. It's not just monsters that haunt the mind, but the absence of things. Silence, stillness, loneliness. The gap where someone should be. The sagas are full of it. Men who wandered off alone in the woods and came back. Different. Women who slept too far from others and began dreaming things that made their eyes go strange. Even the gods, mighty as they are, rarely travel without companions. Together is safety, apart is invitation. And when you're apart too long, you start hearing things. First, you convince yourself it's nothing. The fire popping, a rat in the wall, the wind finding a new way through the thatch. But the sound repeats. A whisper, a name, maybe yours, maybe not. And the worst part? Sometimes you want to follow it. That's what frightens you most. Not the sound, but the urge to listen, to go, to check. That thin line between curiosity and compulsion. You've felt it before, creeping in during long, cold nights when your breath curls into the air and your mind slips sideways. Here's a fringe belief passed around by shepherds and woodcutters. Being alone too long in winter doesn't just make you lonely. It thins the barrier between your soul and whatever's outside, and if you're not careful, something else might slip in. Not like possession, not exactly. More like influence. You still look like you, but you stop making eye contact. You stop eating with the others. You sleep near the wall. You stop talking. Until eventually someone notices, and by then, it's too late. The elders have stories, of course. They always do. One speaks of the Fitraganga, the White Walkers. Not undead, not ghosts. People who disappeared in the snow and came back hollow. Not violent, not even strange at first. Just empty. Like the cold itself learned to wear a human face. They always sleep alone. There's scholarly debate, naturally. Some argue that these are just metaphors, warnings against isolation, against madness, against the psychological toll of endless darkness and close quarters. Others think they reflect real fears tied to winter survival. That being alone in a harsh climate was such a serious danger, it naturally became folded into myth. You don't care which version is true, because right now your fingers are cold, your heart is pounding, and you're clinging to your sister like she's the last rope on the edge of a cliff. You finally close your eyes again, listening to the quiet chaos of the Longhouse. Soft snores, someone muttering in their sleep, a goat coughing somewhere near the door. You hear people, and that means you're safe. But you make a promise to yourself. You'll never sleep by the wall. You'll never sleep in silence. And if you wake to find that perfect, awful stillness again, you'll wake someone else, just in case. Because the Longhouse is warm, the Longhouse is crowded, the Longhouse is life. And the cold wants you alone. Time is slippery in the Longhouse. You notice it most in winter, when day and night become nearly indistinguishable. Grey blending into grey, and darkness settling in long before you're ready for it. There's no ticking clock, no sunrise that bursts into the rafters and tells you, now, begin. Instead, there are guesses, hunches, the slow, quiet rituals of a world that doesn't bother with exact hours. You wake again, not because you're well rested or finished dreaming, but because someone else stirs. A cough, the shuffle of feet on straw, a creak from the roof, and that's enough. Your body learns to tell time through movement, through warmth, through the smell of porridge starting to thicken near the fire. You don't ask, what time is it? You ask, has the fire been stirred? Or, did the goats rise yet? It's always some variation of dark. That's just the default now. A darkness that feels like it might never lift, that presses against the narrow windows and dares the sun to show itself. On some days, you wonder if the sun has died. Like maybe it was swallowed by the sea, or dragged into the underworld by a frost giant. No one would be surprised. The light is so rare now that people cheer for it, actually cheer, when a shaft of it finds its way into the Longhouse through a break in the clouds. You stretch under your furs and try to guess the hour by how stiff your legs are. Not early, not too late either. The hearth is down to red coals. Someone's tending it again, poking lazily with an iron stick, trying to wake the heat without fully committing to the effort. The dog lifts his head, yawns, then flops back down with a sigh. A normal rhythm, you think, somewhere in the middle of this dark day. Or maybe early night, or whatever. You reach for your boots. That's another way time reveals itself, by how cold your boots are. In the depth of night, they're ice blocks. You have to warm them under your cloak or near the fire before slipping them on. But now, they're merely cold, manageable. That tells you something. Maybe a few hours have passed, maybe enough. You eat whatever is warm. Gruel, probably. You can't be picky when your taste buds are frozen and your entire sense of time is based on porridge texture. You chew, stare into the coals and listen. That's when you hear someone say it. Almost midday. That doesn't mean much, but it's a marker. Midday in winter looks exactly like late evening. Just a slightly lighter shade of depression. But it feels different. People get busier, someone sharpens tools, a kid gets scolded. The healer checks the sick again. There's energy in the room now, even if no one knows why. You ride the wave of it, moving because others are moving, working because the alternative is to sit and feel the cold seep deeper into your bones. One of the elders mentions that it might snow again tonight. Everyone nods like that's news. It's always snowing. But saying it out loud, acknowledging it, feels important. Like naming a storm gives you some power over it, or at least makes you look less surprised when it arrives. Here's something funny. In the sagas, time is epic. It moves with the weight of fate. Battles are measured in days, voyages in weeks. Years are marked by who lived and who died. But in real Viking life, time is petty, fickle. In winter, it crawls and leaps and stalls. You can work for hours and find out it's still morning, or nap for what feels like minutes and wake to someone saying it's the middle of the night again. This messes with your mind. Badly. You lose track of everything. Days of the week? Gone. How many nights it's been since Yule? No clue. Whether that dream about swimming through frozen mud was yesterday or the day before, who can say? You're pretty sure your brain has started measuring time in firewood. Like 2 logs ago, someone told a story. 1 log from now, the kids will get fussy again. It's not just you, everyone's off. There's a quiet sense of unease in the Longhouse when the hours stretch too far without markers. People get weird. They start talking to themselves more, picking fights over nothing, forgetting names, staring at a wall like it owes them something. There's an old theory, fringe but not without merit, that long winters created their own kind of madness, a seasonal slipping, not full insanity but a slow warping of logic and mood, fed by poor lighting and poor nutrition, and too many days in the same room with the same dozen smells. They didn't call it depression back then, they just called it winter. You see it happening now. One of the women near the back platform is brushing her hair out over and over, the same stroke, same section. Her eyes are unfocused, distant. Another man sits staring into his bowl like it contains prophecy. No one's worried yet. These things pass. But if they go on too long, someone will nudge the school to start a story, or someone else will announce a game, just to shake the fog. Because when time stops moving, so do people. One man, Tor, you think his name is, has taken to pacing. Not big laps, just 5 steps forward, 5 steps back, over and over. He says it helps him think, or remember, or breathe. He doesn't explain. You don't ask. There's no sun to guide you, no stars you can see from under the thatch. You're trapped in a slow, quiet drift, like a boat with no oars. The hours slide past without anchors. Still, the Longhouse keeps time in its own way. The fire is the clock. The animals are the chimes. The people are the moving hands adjusting to each moment, making sense of the dark by simply living through it. And when all else fails, someone will shout, "Time to eat!" And just like that, everyone nods and says, "Of course it is," because eating is one of the only things that still feels real. You wonder idly if the gods feel time like this, if Odin ever stares into the void of Ginnungagap and says, "Wait, what day is it again?" You hope so. It would make him seem a little more human, a little more here. You wrap yourself tighter in your cloak, stand, stretch, step out to check the goats. It's probably time, even if you have no idea what time that actually is. The wind slaps your face the second you crack the door and the snow is still falling. You nod once, like that settles it. Afternoon? Probably. The storm begins with a whisper, like all the worse ones do. Just a bit of wind whining through the seams of the Longhouse, slipping between the cracks like a thief with no hurry. You hear it first when you're tending the fire, bent low to shift the coals, and for a moment you think it's someone behind you. A breath, a word, but there's no one there. Just the sound of the wind playing tricks. By nightfall it's louder. Not quite a scream, not yet. Just enough to make the roof sigh and the beams groan under their own weight. Someone wedges more moss into the wall slats, and the healer moves her herbs farther from the door, muttering about drafts. The goats shift in their pen. The dog refuses to sleep near the door, choosing instead to wedge himself between a barrel and a small child like some kind of furry sentinel. Everyone knows what's coming. The signs are there. The fire won't draw right. Smoke lingers in the rafters longer than it should. The chickens stop making noise, huddling into their own feathers like they're bracing for judgment. The air is heavy, dense, as if the sky itself is crouching over the Longhouse, ready to press down. And then, just before midnight, the storm arrives. It hits like a god's exhale. Wind slams against the walls in long drawn-out howls, shaking the timber frame from top to bottom. The thatch hisses and shifts above your head. Somewhere outside, a shutter breaks loose and clatters across the yard, swallowed instantly by the dark. The snow doesn't fall now. It attacks. It drives sideways, slamming into the Longhouse like ocean spray turned solid. Inside, no one speaks. The fire is stacked high, all hands tending it in shifts. The warm core of the longhouse is protected like a sacred flame. The outer beds, the ones closest to the walls, are abandoned. People pull their bedding closer to the hearth, crowding together, tense and watchful. It's not just the cold you're afraid of. It's what rides with the wind. The stories come flooding back, not from the schools this time, from memory, the whispered ones you heard as a child, half believed but never forgotten. The Vindganda, the windwalkers, spirits that travel in storms, slipping through gaps in the wall, looking for warmth, for breath, for weakness. You don't know if they're real, but when the wind howls just right, when it makes the roof timbers tremble and the fire lean sideways, you feel something ancient move through the air, and you suddenly remember why your people built homes with no windows. You're supposed to stay quiet during storms like this. No singing, no laughter, no loud words. It's said the wind spirits are drawn to noise, especially joy. So everyone falls silent, even the children. One of them starts to whimper, and her mother places a hand gently over her mouth. The baby in the corner is bundled so tightly it doesn't even stir. The only sounds are the wind, the creaking beams, and the shifting coals. You lie there under the furs, eyes wide, every muscle tight. The firelight dances on the rafters above, and in the flickering shadows shapes begin to form. Your mind plays tricks, long limbs reaching, faces you don't know, something crouched just beyond the smoke's edge. You blink and they vanish, but you blink again and they come back. There's a reason your ancestors painted runes on the walls, a reason they carved symbols into the bedposts and burned sacred herbs when the sky turned like this. Protection, warding memory. You can almost hear your grandmother now muttering her favourite storm chant, the one that starts with "stay small, stay silent, stay still," like it's an incantation against being noticed. And in this moment you understand her in a way you never did before. The longhouse shifts again, a great wooden groan as the wind presses harder. Snow drives into the seams, slipping through in cold drips that sizzle when they hit the firestone. The roof feels impossibly close now, like it's curling inward under the storm's pressure. Every eye is fixed upward. No one sleeps. There's a debate among scholars, of course, about how much of this fear was practical versus spiritual. Some say these stories were cautionary tales, ways to make sure people stayed put during dangerous weather. Others believe the Norse genuinely felt the presence of something more in the wind. Not gods necessarily, but forces, wild and unknowable. You don't know which is true, but tonight you don't care. Tonight you believe whatever keeps the roof on. A sudden crack splits the air, something heavy snapping outside. A tree maybe, or the fence. You all freeze. A few people make the sign for Thor's hammer, others just hold their breath, waiting. The baby lets out a single high-pitched cry, and someone claps softly once to break the tension. It doesn't help. Even the fire doesn't feel safe anymore. Its shadows stretch too far, crawl too slowly. The flickering makes your heart race. It's too easy to see things in the flames that aren't there. You close your eyes and try to count heartbeats. You make it to 7 before the wind hits the door hard enough to rattle the hinges. You all look at the door like it might open, like something might step in. No one moves. Here's a fringe tradition you remember hearing once. In some valleys, when a storm reached this pitch, people would place offerings near the hearth, not to a specific god, but to the storm itself. A piece of bread, a smear of honey, a carved bone. The idea was simple. If the storm is hungry, better it eats that than you. You nudge your sister and pass her the last heel of the black bread. She nods without asking. Together you set it by the hearth, just in case. The night drags on. The storm doesn't lessen. It changes. The wind dips lower, slower, less violent now, but more insistent. Like a voice pressed against the walls, murmuring something you're not quite ready to understand. You shiver and press closer to the others. You feel the longhouse holding, just barely, but holding. When the wind finally begins to ease, it's like the whole room exhales at once. You feel the tension leak out of the walls. The fire grows steady again. The shadows retreat. No one celebrates. No one speaks. But shoulders relax, eyes close. Some even risk sleep. You don't. Not yet. You lie there, staring into the fire, thinking about the world beyond the door, buried in snow, beaten by wind. You think of the storm spirits, still circling, still watching. You think of how easily that wind could have cracked the roof, could have scattered your warmth like feathers across the ice. But it didn't. The longhouse held, and inside it, so did you. The first thing you notice when you wake is your breath, thick, white, curling above you like a thread of smoke. That's how cold it is inside. Your nose stings, and when you sniff, you can feel the sharp edge of frost forming just at the nostrils. You don't move yet. You lie still under the firs, waiting to see what kind of morning it is. Listening, smelling, feeling. The storm is over. You know it not because someone said so, but because of what's missing. No more battering wind. No more creaks and groans from the roof beams. Just the slow, careful shuffling of tired limbs and the occasional murmur of voices low with sleep. The fire has settled to a soft red bed of coals, pulsing like a heartbeat. The longhouse exhales, weary and whole. You push back the furs just a little, and the cold rushes in like a rude guest. Your eyelashes are stiff. Your fingers ache as you flex them. The floor is hard beneath you, the straw flattened and damp in spots. It smells like sweat, smoke, ash, and breath. The longhouse's version of morning dew. Across the room, someone's already up. They're crouched near the hearth, scraping ash aside with a carved stick, looking for live embers to coax back into flame. You watch the ritual unfold, slow and practiced. A bit of moss, a bit of dried bark, a hollow breath, drawn in and blown out like a spell. The glow builds, sparks leap, the first tongue of yellow rises into the gloom, and just like that, you have fire. The dog stretches beside you, stiff and groaning, then flops his head down again, clearly unbothered by your attempts at movement. You roll onto your side and sit up, knees cracking, cloak dragging across the floor. You pull your boots close, left just near the fire overnight, still a little warm. You press your hands into them for a moment before pulling them on. The morning air tastes like ash and wood smoke. Your throats roar. You cough once, twice, and realize everyone else sounds the same. A chorus of rough breathing and snorting. It's not sickness. It's just what the longhouse does to you in winter. The air doesn't move much. The fire eats what little freshness there is. Your lungs start each day feeling like they've already smoked 10 bowls of bad birch. And yet, it's comforting. Familiar. You wouldn't trade it for the emptiness of sleeping outdoors or in a barn. Even now, with the weight of the storm still lingering in your joints, you feel oddly grateful. You're still here, still warm, still surrounded by life. You shuffle over to the fire and join the circle. Someone hands you a cup. Lukewarm water flavoured with something vaguely herbal. You drink it without question. One woman is already grinding oats with a flat stone, her shoulders hunched, movements rhythmic. Soon there will be porridge, probably with a few goat hairs in it, definitely with a smoky tang. It'll taste like winter, and you'll eat every last bite. Then comes the cleaning. Not just tidying, cleansing. Storms, especially ones like that, are seen as a kind of spiritual shake-up. After the weather breaks, so do the routines. Floors get swept, bedding gets aired. Herbs are burned to push out what the wind brought in, as your grandmother used to say. Someone tosses dried juniper onto the coals, and the longhouse quickly fills with sharp, peppery smoke that stings the eyes, but somehow feels pure. The skald starts humming. It's a low, wordless tune, rising and falling like breath. No one speaks during it. It's not a formal prayer exactly, but a kind of song to reset the space. It marks the passing of the storm, the survival, and slowly as the coals brighten and the steam rises from bowls of thick porridge, the house begins to shift into the new day. You help brush ash off the floor planks, revealing scattered bones from last night's stew, a few beetles, and something that may or may not be part of someone's old boot. Everything smells like smoke. Your fingers are blackened in minutes, but it feels good, like you're doing something to push back the cold. Eventually someone cracks the door just a bit. Light floods in, a blinding white light that shocks everyone's eyes. It isn't sun exactly, but brightness, and that alone is enough to draw gasps and groans from those still blinking in the shadows. A few children scramble toward the doorway, bare feet slapping on cold wood, breath fogging ahead of them. The world outside is unrecognizable, snowbanks taller than men. The yard swallowed, the fences gone, everything soft and smooth, the contours erased by the storm's relentless hands. The roof is holding, though it moans under the weight, and a few brave souls begin planning how to dig paths back to the woodpile, the latrine, the goat shed. You step outside for a moment and the cold slaps you like an insult. But the air, oh, the air, it's crisp, biting, painfully clean. You suck in a lungful and feel your brain spark awake. For the first time in days, your lungs expand fully. No smoke, no warmth, just snow and wind and sky. You stand there for a full minute, eyes watering, skin burning, heart thumping. Then you go back in, gasping and red-faced, but clear. That's the trade. The longhouse keeps you safe, warm, alive. But it costs you something. Freshness, stillness, solitude, air. And when the storm breaks, and the outside becomes possible again, you taste those things like a prisoner catching a whiff of spring through a barred window. Back inside, people are laughing again, just softly. The tension is lifting. Someone makes a joke about the chickens surviving better than the men. Someone else says the gods must be bored if they're throwing that much snow for fun. You sit by the fire, bowl in hand, and feel the edges of yourself return. Here's a curious belief that lingers in the old stories, that a longhouse wakes after a storm, like a bear stirring in its den. That it breathes easier, that the fire becomes brighter, the beams less burdened, that even the spirits inside stretch and yawn and shake off the weight of the wind. You believe it now. The longhouse feels lighter. The air isn't just warmer, it's clearer. The kind of clarity that comes only after surviving something. You didn't just live through the storm, you earned the morning, and now every breath feels like proof. So you eat, you laugh, you help scrub soot from the sleeping platforms and knock frost off the hanging cloaks. The baby is babbling, the goats are complaining, someone's pouring more water into the stew, and for the first time in what feels like weeks, you don't feel hunted by the cold. You feel human again, and that's enough, and it's the middle of the night. Again. The kind of night where time drips instead of flows, and your only sense of it comes from the sound of someone softly coughing 3 beds down. You're just drifting back to sleep, head sinking into the worn fur that smells faintly of goat and your cousin's feet, when you hear it, a whimper, then a thump, then a full-blown, red-faced, soul-crushing wail. A child is awake, and not just any child, the baby. You freeze for a moment in that peculiar Viking half-conscious dread, the knowledge that sleep is gone and not coming back anytime soon. There's no insulation for sound in a longhouse, no walls to muffle the shrieking. When a baby cries, everyone wakes, or at least everyone hears it. Whether they wake up or just silently suffer is another matter. The mother is already sitting up, swaying, whispering soft words that don't work. She bounces the child gently on her lap, but the howling only intensifies. The baby, red-faced and furious at the sheer injustice of existence, begins flailing like it's auditioning to be a berserker. You bury your face in the fur and groan into it. Again, someone mutters nearby. Oh good, someone else says flatly. The baby's reminding us we're alive. A few muffled chuckles ripple through the dark. This is not the first time, and it won't be the last. Babies don't care about your sleeplessness or the ancient storm that just ended. They don't care about gods or warriors or firewood rations. They care about being too cold, or too warm, or too hungry, or just bored, and they scream accordingly. It's surprising, really, that more sagas don't mention the real trials of Viking life, like sleeping 6 feet from an angry infant with lungs like a war horn. It's not just the baby, either. There are toddlers here, too. You've got one who kicks in her sleep, one who sleepwalks, one who spent an entire night last week chewing on the edge of a fur cloak like a teething wolf cub. And then there's the boy who snores like an old man and talks about eagles in his dreams, loudly. You think back to the storm, how everyone slept in frozen silence, waiting for the roof to cave in, or the wind spirits to slip through the seams. But now it's children who break the peace. You would almost trade them for a snowstorm. Almost. Still, no one's truly angry. There's a strange kind of tolerance in the longhouse. You learn to live with noise, with mess, with being woken 4 times a night by a kicking leg or a leaking child, or someone's elbow in your ribs. It's part of the bargain. You survive together, or not at all. You glance across the room and see an older boy being elbowed awake. His mother points toward the toddler who's somehow wriggled halfway into the goat pen. The boy sighs, stands up, and retrieves the child with the weary resignation of someone who's done this exact thing every other night this week. The toddler giggles, delighted, then immediately starts trying to eat a piece of firewood. You wonder how anyone gets any sleep at all, and the truth is, they don't. Sleep here is stolen in pieces, a nap in the afternoon while someone else watches the children. A full stretch of sleep, if you're lucky enough to be sick, elderly, or frightening enough that no one bothers you, looking at you, Bjorn the warrior. Parents especially live in a state of near-constant semi-consciousness, one ear always tuned to the soft snuffling sounds of their little ones. There's no such thing as privacy either. If a child wets the bed, everyone knows. If a baby has colic, the entire Longhouse becomes intimately familiar with every stage of it. And if two people try to sneak in a moment of affection under the furs while their child pretends to be asleep, well, let's just say everyone hears that too. There's a fringe idea you once overheard from a travelling healer, that babies cry more in the cold, that something about the dark, the frost, the endless closeness of bodies makes them restless, that their dreams become tangled with the dreams of the adults around them, that they feel too much, see things they shouldn't. No one quite believes it, but when the baby starts crying again 30 minutes after finally falling asleep, someone mutters, "She's got the night ghost in her again," and no one laughs. There's scholarly debate, of course, on how much modern parenting methods apply to historical Viking families. Some argue that children were mostly ignored unless they were old enough to fetch water or carry a spear. Others suggest they were coddled, deeply bonded to their kin, raised in full view of the community with a mix of patience and tough love. But here, in this longhouse, with a baby howling and a toddler clinging to your ankle, you suspect the truth lies somewhere in between. There's no choice but to raise them together. Every adult becomes part parent, part aunt or uncle, part babysitter. If a child crawls into your bedding during the night, you just adjust. If someone's little one bites your foot in the dark, you grumble, pull it away and fall back asleep. You learn which kids sleep deeply and which ones sleep like wild squirrels on fire. Eventually the baby quiets. Her mother hums a song that sounds older than language itself. A slow, rising lullaby with no real words, just the rhythm of comfort. The coals in the hearth flicker. Someone sighs deeply. Another shift in the straw. A blanket being pulled up. Silence, soft and tentative, returns. You don't move, you hardly breathe. You know better than to tempt fate. A few heartbeats pass, then from across the room, a tiny voice. "I need to pee." Half the longhouse groans at once. The boy is ushered toward the chamber pot with all the grace and enthusiasm of a condemned man. He makes it, barely, without incident, for once. When he returns to his spot, he promptly steals someone else's fur and falls asleep in under 10 seconds. You envy him, and still, somehow despite the chaos, you drift off again too. Because that's the secret of Viking sleep. It's not about silence or comfort or personal space. It's about enduring. You rest not because it's perfect, but because you have to. Because tomorrow will be cold, and loud, and filled with more children. You nestle down into your little pocket of warmth, the air heavy with soot and dreams and the distant smell of baby spit. And even though your foot is still wet from whatever that toddler drooled on you earlier, you manage to fall asleep, and stay asleep, until the next cry. You wake to a sound you haven't heard in weeks, a quiet dripping. Not the kind that signals a leak in the roof, but the gentle, rhythmic kind that means something else entirely. The thaw has begun. You lie there for a moment, stunned, blinking at the rafters, half expecting to find frost still clinging to the beams, but it's not there. Instead, water collects slowly at the edge of a wooden plank, fattening into a droplet that finally lets go, landing with a soft pat against the floor. You sit up, and the air hits you differently. Not warm exactly, but softer, less cruel, the kind of cold that no longer bites. The fire hasn't even been stoked yet, and still you aren't shivering. Your breath barely fogs in front of your face. Somewhere near the door, the dog's already awake, ears perked. He knows what it means too. Spring is coming. You can feel it in your body, the way your limbs ache less, how your shoulders aren't curled so tightly in on themselves. You stretch and actually yawn, which feels like a strange luxury after months of waking up clenched. Around you, the longhouse begins to stir differently. Not sluggish, not groggy. Something brighter moves through the bodies here, a whisper of change, and people are catching it like a scent on the wind. The baby isn't crying. Miraculous. A toddler toddles past, barefoot, giggling, holding a feather like it's a sacred object. He leaves behind a trail of damp footprints, and no one scolds him. Outside there's noise. Real noise. Meltwater rushing down the slope, slipping past the longhouse in a bubbling ribbon. Ice is breaking off the eaves. falling in jagged chunks that explode into glitter when they hit the earth. The chickens are louder, the goats are braver. One even nudges the door open before a child rushes to herd it back with a broom. You join the others at the door and pull it open all the way, not just a crack like before. Sunlight hits you like a slap, but a kind one, a warm hand to the face instead of a frozen fist. You squint, and then you smile, a slow, unpracticed thing that feels like stretching a muscle you forgot you had. The snow is still deep, but it's losing. You can see patches of brown earth peeking through along the fence line. Water drips from the roof like a broken rhythm. There's even colour again. Not much, but enough. The sky isn't iron, it's blue. Pale, yes, but unmistakably blue. You step outside, boots sinking deep, and breathe in. It smells like mud, like wet wood, like thawed manure, sure, but also like life. It's not fresh, not yet, but it's something. It's not frozen death. Back inside, the shift continues. Cloaks are pulled off shoulders. The fire's no longer a frantic necessity, but a gentle companion again. Someone opens the shutter all the way, letting in the sharp light. It hurts the eyes, but no one complains. They want to see, to remember. People start doing unnecessary things, cleaning corners that haven't seen daylight in months, rebraiding hair, checking the tools. You catch someone rearranging the furs like guests are coming. They're not, but it feels like someone should be. The return of spring deserves company. The school tells a story today, and it's a warm one. Not a battle saga or a ghost tale, but a myth about Freyr, god of fertility and sunshine, and the first time he rode across the sky after winter. In the story, the snow melted where his horse stepped, and flowers burst up overnight. He spoke to the trees and they bloomed. He touched the ocean and the fish leapt with joy. It's absurd, beautiful, and everyone listens like they haven't heard it 100 times. Here's a funny fringe belief you remember hearing as a child. That spring comes faster if you welcome it. That the more joy you show, the more warmth the gods allow. Laughing, singing, even dancing. It's not just celebration, it's summoning. Like you have to prove you're ready for the light before it stays. So some people sing today. Badly, yes, but with heart. A girl grabs a hand drum and thumps a rhythm that doesn't quite match the steps of the boy trying to dance. Two elders sit with their feet in the sun, eyes closed, faces turned up like sunflowers. You watch them with a strange mix of admiration and envy. They know how to enjoy this, how to lean into it without fear that the snow might return tomorrow, because it might. That's the thing, this isn't the end of winter. Not really. There'll be more cold nights, more snowfalls. The seasons don't shift like chapters. They blend, bleed into each other. But this is the first sign, the proof that you made it through, the moment when survival becomes living again. You help bring out the bedding. It's damp and heavy with months of sleep, but the wind lifts it gently, drying it by degrees. You shake out the furs, knock straw loose, watch dust dance in the sunlight and think, we are not buried anymore. Even the animals seem lighter. The goat that tried to escape earlier now sits in a sunbeam, like it owns the entire village. The chickens scratch with purpose. A raven circles above the longhouse, casting a long shadow that flits across your face and then vanishes. There's debate sometimes among historians about how Vikings marked the change of seasons. Some claim it was all about calendars, moons, sacrifices. Others believe it was more intuitive, felt, not calculated. You suspect it's both. You suspect the truth lives in days like this. No festival, no fire ritual, just a longhouse full of tired people breathing easier than they have in months. That night no one adds more wood to the fire than necessary. Not because there's an abundance, but because the desperation is gone. The heat is kind, not vital. You sit with your back against the wall, watching the glow play across the floor, listening to the wind that no longer sounds like a threat. Children fall asleep fast, even the baby. The snoring is soft, rhythmic, like waves against a wooden hull. You close your eyes and dream of grass, and now, after all those nights curled beneath the sagging roof beams, after the frostbitten toes, the sleepless hours spent staring at dancing firelight, and the impossible choir of snoring relatives and livestock, you step outside one last time. The air is sharp but not cruel. It smells of wet bark and something green just barely thinking about growing. You stand still, boots sunk ankle deep in slush, breath steady. Behind you, the longhouse creaks, alive with soft movement and the kind of quiet chatter that doesn't need to shout anymore. A baby giggles. Someone laughs. There's warmth in the sound, not just heat, but warmth. The real kind, the human kind. You've survived the brutal winter, not by conquering it, but by enduring it, by sharing breath, fire, fur, and fear. You didn't sleep in silence, or in comfort, or in solitude, but you slept, and that, in this place, means everything. There are no medals for making it through the dark. No saga verses written for the person who kept the fire going at 3 a.m, or who held the goat steady during the coldest night of the year. But maybe there should be. Maybe survival is the story. And now, as the ice drips from the eaves and the world begins to stretch, yawn, and soften, you feel something new in your chest. Rest. Not the sleep of exhaustion, but the peace that comes after. So go ahead. Breathe in the melt. Let your fingers stretch. Let your back unknot. The worst of the cold has passed. And if you ever forget what it took to get through it, just close your eyes, think of smoke curling in the rafters, of straw beds and wool cloaks, of firelight on tired faces, and remember, this is how Vikings slept through winter.